going on, everyone? It's Jeranism back again for another episode of GLOBEBUSTERS Live, episode numero ocho. With me, as always, is Bob, Xanadude60, TJ, my wife Missa, and myself. So let's say hi to everyone and see what's going on. Bob, what's a good word?
Oh, doing good. Recovering a little bit from some dental work today, so my jaw's a little sore. But other than that, I think I'll live, and got all kinds of exciting things, I guess, that have been happening in the flat Earth world this week that we could talk about.
Very cool. TJ, how are you?
Hey, doing fine. Just spent this past week watching a lot of videos on the things happening in the ISS, and just trying to really look at details and see if I can figure out what things they're doing with their floating. And I don't know. I don't know. I think we give them too much credit for technology. I think they're doing a lot of green screens and CGI and things like that. So I'm gonna keep digging in and looking at that and see what I come up with.
Excellent, excellent. Missa, how are we?
I'm good. Always here for moral support. You know, same old thing. Make good breakfast, lunch, and dinner when you get hungry. That's all.
Wouldn't trade it for the world. So I know we had talked about possibly having a NASA insider, or I guess that's what I'd call him. But he actually wanted to wait until tomorrow. So rumor has it we may have somebody who's got some kind of inside information tomorrow. We'll see what that information is or what he wants to talk about. But tune in tomorrow and we'll have that as part of our ISS watching party. So that'll kind of go well with the NASA theme. I also wanted to talk a little bit about September 23rd, just to kind of get that out there and see what people think about that. Always interested in Bob's opinion and TJ's opinion on that stuff. And then from that, we could also talk a little bit about some of the things that have come out in the last week or so regarding Flat Earth. I think some excellent things that show that people are starting to test and think outside the box and observe the world they live in. So that's exciting. As far as September 23rd, I'll just kind of hit a few highlight points. These are things that I've learned in the last month or so of why people think something is going to happen, and then we can kind of go around and see what each person's opinion on those things are, and will anything happen, or will we be sitting here in 2 weeks with nothing different? So the whole point of it is I guess the Day of Atonement is this year on September 23rd, and that's kind of the Jewish Day of the Absolving of Sins. I know the Pope is visiting New York, or Washington, D.C., sorry, on the 23rd. So I know that also has caused a few people to claim some sort of biblical connection here. I know Jade Helm concludes tomorrow, right? Is that what you guys have heard? The 15th?
I believe so, yes.
So I know we've got that going on. If you've looked in at all to the Shmitma, and I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Shemitah.
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 I like Schmitta better, like the Mike Schmitta, no?
Mike Schmidt. You mean
there you go, see?
The Phillies baseball player?
Excellent. Good knowledge. Phenomenal knowledge. But in 2001, supposedly that's like the 7-year cycle, right? So I know in 2001 there was some sort of market crash in September, and then 2008 there was supposedly another market crash around the same time, and so the Shemitah ends. Am I saying that right?
Uh-huh.
Shemitah. Okay. So the Shemitah ends this year, the 29th of September. So
No, the Shemitah ended last night.
ended?
Is that because today's
Rosh Hashanah. It's a new year.
Right.
Oh, okay. I thought I had heard 29th of September, so see? That's why I'm running it by you guys. And then there's a whole bunch of the prophecy going on with the Daniel prophecy talking about the 7 weeks of 7 days, right, or the 49, and if you change that to years, and then you look at like when the Six-Day War was and the end of, which was that middle of 67, I think, 1967. So you can add 49 to that, and you come up with 2016. So I know that's another reason why people have been pointing to this time period. There's also a guy in Puerto Rico named Efren, I think Efren Rodriguez, who says that a huge meteor will fall near Puerto Rico this September, landing in the ocean, causing a huge tidal wave that will affect the east coast of the United States.
Is it going to swallow Puerto Rico?
Yeah, but he's from Puerto Rico too, so he must know. You get forewarning if you live where the meteor hits. So also, a bunch of people say that it appears in a bunch of movies and TV shows. I've looked into some of that. It looks like a bunch of coincidences to me, but again, that's just me. If you guys remember that French politician who said sometime in 2013 that we had 500 days to avoid climate chaos. Have you guys seen that clip?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so that 500 days coincidentally ends on September 24th. So the 23rd would be 499 days if that guy was saying anything truth-like. And then also a Jewish rabbi I know has recently been among those who has announced the return of the Messiah, which we also know, or as we know, is the Antichrist. And he's calling all Jews to migrate to the land of Israel. I took a little quote from that article where he said, when asked about the timing of the Messiah's arrival, Rabbi Kanevsky answered, at the end of this sabbatical year, several people have asked that rabbi to verify this, and he has given the same answer each time. This year, the sabbatical year, and it will be ending on the 29th day of Elul, which by the Gregorian calendar falls on Saturday, September 12th, 2015. So I guess that's what the end of the Shemitah was, right then? Shemitah, whatever. I'm going to call it the Shemitah all day.
Well,
so.
It should have ended Sunday evening because the days go from sundown to sundown.
Right.
Sorry. Sundown to sundown. So I believe it was last night at sundown when the Shemitah would have ended, which now we're in the year of Jubilee.
Yep, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
This is the year Jubilee where all your debts are wiped out. They're all gone. Happens every 50 years.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wish. And the Day of Atonement, is that September 23rd?
Let's see.
Now, I know that there was also the biblical parable of the fig tree.
Evening of the 22nd.
Oh, okay. And then there's the parable of the fig tree. I've heard a lot of people talk about saying, you will know that the kingdom of God is near, and his generation will not pass until these things are fulfilled. And a generation, technically, according to a few sources, I looked it up, I saw anywhere from 65 to 69, but some people say it's 67 years, which would mean if we look at the birth of the nation of Israel, which was in 48,
Jeez, don't
at
start that.
67 to 48, we arrive at 2015. So again, it's just, to me, it looks like a bunch of conjecture and a bunch of people taking different numbers, and that's kind of what I see as you're able to do with the Bible quite easily, is if you look through any books, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Joshua, all those books, there's a ton of predictions that it seems like if you work the numbers around enough and change weeks to years and change years to days, and you can pretty much predict any date that you wanted.
And that's been happening for a long time.
Yeah, for a very long time.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jaron, did you ask me something?
Yeah, I was just saying, have you seen anything else or what you think of the entire thing? Do you think anything will happen? Your prediction, we're recording it here, so when the world ends, we can look back and say, see, Bob said it wouldn't end, and now we're all dead.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to end. I do think that they're going to try and create some market crashes, try and, completely pull the rug out from underneath us in the monetary system. Some people are saying that is well on its way. I think Rich, Mr. Thrive and Survive, did a video today showing 200-day trends and how today it basically is starting, for this next massive financial collapse. So, and of course, as far as everything else, they are just running overtime in false flag operations. A lot of other things happening. Germany, I guess, has a refugee situation that could potentially lead to some violence or rioting. You have the professor that was killed in Mississippi, and of course, then there was Japan had Mount Aso, I believe, was the name of the volcano that's erupting, and of course, California wildfires are still raging out of control. So they say that the end this time is supposed to come in fire rather than a flood. And if I were to take a look at California, it almost seems that way, at least from the news. You're actually out there, so you would probably know better, but it doesn't look like it's a good situation. But I seriously doubt the world is going to end. I think most of these are scare tactics and fear tactics to generate fear, so that that very fear could be used against us. And I think most of it is just desperation moves of a cabal that's about finished.
TJ, your opinion?
Well, I definitely do agree that there's a financial meltdown coming, and I've known about that everybody's talked about it for a million years, but I knew that it was coming, should be coming this year in the fall for, I believe, like the last year or two. And even when the news media and people are getting all scared and friends saying, oh no, it's supposed to be in the spring, we're supposed to have the collapse, like it's not happening. Like, you don't know. I'm like, watch. Oh no, they changed it, it's the summer. Not happening. Watch. And it never did happen. And definitely there's a lot of fear mongering. The world is coming to the end. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about the book of Revelation and prophecy in the Bible and how it's used to manipulate people and to keep them passive so they don't do anything. And so what happens is people say Jesus is coming, he's going to return, the rapture will be in my lifetime, I won't see the tribulation, I don't have anything to worry about. So I'll just sit back and get excited when I see how dark it gets because I know I'm going to be out of here and my family's all going to be safe. And a few years ago, there was a guy I know that a long time ago, he beat the IRS and hasn't had to pay income tax in a really long time. And Kansas just came after him a few years ago and put a lien on his house for $250,000, so he wasn't able to beat them. And what he told me what I should do is, he said, this whole thing is about to collapse. The banks will be gone. The IRS will be gone. So what you should do, telling me what I should do, just live off of credit cards, take all the money you make, and buy gold and silver and things that you need, because by the time that it's time to come after you when you can't pay your credit card bills anymore, they won't be around anyway. And this was like 3 years ago. And so still today, we have not had that situation happen, and I would be screwed over in debt and tons of interest right now if I would have listened to him. And I mention that because I was talking to a friend of mine today, and he knows a lady that 10 years ago was doing that exact thing. She believed that any day Jesus was going to return. She was paying everything on credit cards and keeping her money, and I don't know what she was doing with it, because the world's about to come to an end, and the credit card debt's not going to matter because she's going to be out of here. And that's the kind of stuff that all these talking heads have been getting people into, whether it's the news or the Christian media or preachers, pastors, Christian speakers have been leading people to believe these lies and make decisions on their life that just stupid decisions. Now there's plenty of Christians who don't fall for that bull crap and aren't racking up debt and dependent on Jesus to wipe their credit cards clean or anything like that. But that's what happens to people. I mean, my mother is always watching the news and watching Jack Van Impe trying to find out when is this peace ordeal going to happen with Jerusalem and the Antichrist is about to be revealed and Jesus is about to come. She's been doing that crap for like 20 years or 25 years or whatever. And it's like people have been doing that for thousands of years before her. It's like, it's time to give it up. It's time to stop that nonsense. And just like the recent thing in 2012, the world's coming to an end. Oh no! And I'm like, no, it's not. Nothing is. There's not even going to be anything spectacular happen. People are like, at least something in the skies or in nature is going to happen. At least minimum. Like nothing is going to happen. We're all being worked up for nothing. So that's some of my thoughts on all this nonsense. But I definitely do believe that they're at any time. I believe it's going to happen this month, but it could be October. There should be a financial situation happen, and it's not just because of Jonathan Cahn, which is the rabbi who's been speaking on the Shemitah and the Harbingers, which the Harbingers, I have a hard time believing or understanding why that's a bestseller, because that is one of the worst written books I have ever tried to read in my life, and had to struggle through 2, maybe 3 chapters, and I just couldn't read it. It's just so poorly written. Yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that, but anyway.
You were just trying to say it sucked.
It was horrible. It was a horrible book.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think it has to be looked at as inevitable that the money situation in the United States, which unfortunately will pour out to the rest of the world, has got to come to a conclusion at some point, simply because people have to realize that the paper money has no backing, that that there is no substance there. And I think kind of that is the story of the world. If you think about it, is the entire world is propped up on a false idea, and simply because people have accepted it, it now works. And so I don't think there's even a date that you can set on it. It'll just happen when basically it's forced to happen, and that's kind of the way I look at it.
Oh, look who just joined the call.
Hello, it's James Frog. I can hear you.
What's going on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Hey, James.
This is my first attempt at modern technology.
Hey, James, can you turn down your volume so I don't hear myself? We can hear you, but we hear the echo of the show.
I don't hear an echo.
I have headphones on and it should block it.
Yeah, I don't hear an echo.
I don't either. I think it might be just on your end, Jaron.
Okay, let me see if I can fix it.
Okay.
He's drinking that. What beer is that? That's that old school stuff.
Yeah, Pabst.
Perhaps, yeah.
Redneck White Sox and Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
Gotta stay true to my cultural heritage, man.
All right, James, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you very well. So I was a little bit busy today. I wasn't sure if we were going to make it, and luckily the technology works first time out, so I'm happy.
No problem. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what's going on?
Yeah, my name is James Fogg, and my interest in the NASA and round or flat Earth stuff is that I worked at a print shop back in 1981 called Century Graphics, and they got a job to print the manual for the space shuttle. And there were a couple of things in there that kind of shouldn't have been in there, in my opinion. And that was pretty much it. I'm a musician. I'm in Canoga Park. I'm going to Valley Occupational Center. I'm playing Sunset Strip every once in a while. House of Blues, which is now closed, and Viper Room. And
Okay.
that's it. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
So tell me again how you saw the so-called manual or book that you're talking about. just explain that again?
Okay, yeah, I was at work as a graphics cameraman. I used to use an iTech 3000 camera. This is back in 1980, and it's in Northridge, California, kind of an industrial section. I think Pertec Electronics was on the same street. It was called Bahama Street. And I first heard about it, the manual that we were going to do it, that we had gotten the job. And at that time, I think they had only done test runs of the shuttle, and there were problems with the tiles falling off. But I don't think they had done the official one yet. I'd need to do more research on it. And then, so I was the graphics cameraman on the swing shift from 4 to about 12 o'clock at night. And there was a day shift cameraman also. So some of the job was done by somebody else. And in the beginning, I was at work at my station, and the pressman came over to me and said that my supervisor was kind of upset about something, but he didn't tell me what it was in particular. That he was actually having a nervous breakdown, that he wanted to quit, and he was upset. So what I did is I went into the office, and my supervisor, Perry Brang, said he had the manual to the cockpit, the section of the manual that had to relate to the cockpit, which is separate from everything else. And he was saying that, 1, it was empty, 2, there was no co-pilot, and 3, there's nothing in there in general. And I didn't know what he meant. I was just supposed to pay attention to the fact that this guy was upset and wanted to leave work, and I was supposed to kind of pay attention, all the details. So what I did is I looked through the section for the cockpit, and this is classified, and I got all the way through it and couldn't find what he was talking about. He took it from me, opened it up, and I did look at, the official schematics for the shuttle cockpit, and I only saw one seat in it. And it was just a simple joystick and 2 foot pedals, basically. And then about 6 round dials, which could be, I've seen small jets which had about the same stuff on the inside. The main thing being that there wasn't any room for anybody else. There wasn't a second seat. And what he was saying is that he wanted to reject the job because it wasn't, it was kind of fraud in general.
What exactly, I guess my question is, what exactly was your job? So I understand that you were working for a company, a graphics or cameraman company, you said? But
No,
what exactly was the job?
Oh, it's a print shop, and what I'm doing is I'm photographing plates that go on the press. And it's like a pink rolls of film, and they're about, it's not 12 to 16, I think it's about 12 to 16 inches wide. I think there's 2 different widths, depending on what I'm photographing. So what I do is I have... Call from Cammy Noodle. But it's kind of hard to explain, but it's considered a graphics cameraman, and it's my job to make sure that the originals get printed clearly, so there's no distortion in it.
Okay, maybe it's me that's confused and everybody else understands, but I'm just trying to get it cleared up. So explain to me another job that you've done. Let's remove NASA and tell me something else that you would do in your job that's kind of the same, just so I can kind of get an idea of what your job was.
Oh, like manuals. We had schematic manuals for like a DC-10 or something like that, and I would be photographing all their originals. So
you're talking about photographing the manual?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm photographing the originals for the manual so that it can be mass printed, about to make 500 copies of a particular document.
Okay.
And
so they don't like make photocopies of those things as far as with a photocopy machine. You're saying that they actually have a cameraman who sets up his camera and takes pictures of the original manual?
Correct. And it comes out the back of my machine as a pink thin roll of film, and that is considered a printing plate. And the plate, the stack of plates go, when I get a stack of them, they go over to the pressman, and he puts the pink, sheets on his press, and then the ink is attracted to the image on the plate, and then runs on the press. So there's actually ink getting attached to the plates that I make in his process.
Okay. So you're saying in 1980, which I believe the first launch of the shuttle was in 81, if I remember right.
Correct.
But you're saying so somewhere around 1980, then you were in charge of taking photos of the NASA shuttle manual.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Now,
Bob, you have any questions up to this point, or does this make sense to you? What's going on?
Yeah, so far I'm curious. Did they require you or anybody in your shop to sign any type of confidentiality agreement or anything like that?
No, it was something that I probably signed when I first worked there, but it was not. There was nothing that I individually signed on this at all. It was just part of my job.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we're kind of set up for now. So then you can continue with, so basically what I've gotten so far, then you took pictures of this. It was actually supposed to be you and one other guy taking pictures of this NASA manual, and he got upset for some reason, thinking that what he was taking pictures of was kind of fraudulent or something to that effect. Is that what you said? And then he wanted to quit?
Well, what it was is actually my supervisor, who was not a cameraman. And this is before I started actually photographing it. And it was different sections. The cockpit was a separate job from the rest of it, which included the cargo bay. And the cargo bay and the wings and the braking systems were all done by myself and the day shift cameraman. But we're lower in rank than my supervisor, who was upset. And this is before I actually saw any of the plates or the originals for the back of the space shuttle, the cargo bay area. Now, the thing about the cockpit is that even though I had clearance to see the cargo bay area, I didn't have clearance to see the cockpit. It was apparently more secretive, I guess. I'm not sure what the deal was. But after my supervisor said that nothing was in it and that he was upset, his supervisor, who was the day shift supervisor, came in. His name is Jim, and explained to us that the space shuttle was basically a glider, and that it was not really the spaceship that we were expecting. I was expecting something that was a full-blown spaceship that would come back and all, and was self-powered.
So it was more of a mock-up type unit then, right?
Yeah, apparently. Well, no, the way he was saying it, the way he was saying it is that NASA couldn't really pull off the spaceship as far as the way we were thinking of it, where it was all completely self-contained. And what they would do is put it on rockets and fly it up, and then as soon as it was done with its mission, it would just float back. Which sort of makes sense, but in my opinion, sort of doesn't make sense. Because if it's a glider, it can't really make any maneuvers. It's either one thing or another. It's either a plane or it's a glider. And the part that's hard to figure out about some of this is that, in my opinion, there are a lot of red herrings in it that I may or may not actually understand myself. The red herring would be that, in my opinion, the wingspan is too short for it actually to be a glider, and that what I was seeing was looking at the cockpit of a jet, possibly with a single pilot in it. And that's the part that nobody was supposed to know about it. And I've still never heard anybody speak about it.
Right.
I know there's people in bindery and there's other people that know about it, but I'm apparently the only one that's come forward so far.
Did you see anything at all that indicated that there was any type of like jet engine on it at all, or did it just show like the rockets?
No, I never saw anything, any kind of jet engine, and I'm suspicious of that. That's why I say that it was probably a red herring. I think the cargo bay in of itself, in my opinion, is not real. That's really, they're just covering an engine and pretending it's a cargo bay. But I only think that now, really, after looking at it. So okay, that was the cockpit, and that was separate. And Jim, our supervisor, said, "I'm going to film this uh, after hours." So he made the decision at that point that I wasn't going to get to photograph it, which is very disappointing to me. So I really didn't get to go through it in detail. And that's one of the main pictures that I saw, that it had a single seat. Now the second part of the job was doing the cargo bay, and that's where two people did it: the night shift and the day shift. Me being the night shift person, and I was photographing, and in my opinion, the flaps on the wings make sense as far as following the plenum all the way to the front. And the braking system, I remember looking at the hydraulics to the braking system on the schematic, and it was very similar to like a DC-10. So the flaps and the brakes, in my opinion, were probably not a red herring, in that they made complete sense. The part that I think was a red herring is that I came upon 3 pages that had to do with torpedoes. And I've talked to people in the Navy, and the reason they say it's torpedoes is because it's considered a ship. If it's a ship, it's a torpedo. If it's a plane, it's a bomb. And it was 3 pages, and that's the part that bothered me the most. But I still think it was kind of a red herring. And there were 3 pages, 2 pages with 1 page with 4 torpedoes on it, and 1 page with probably about 5, and 1 page with 2 torpedoes on it. The 2 torpedoes, I think, were some of the longest ones, 12 foot, maybe 15 feet. The 1 page with like about 5 torpedoes definitely started off with a 5-foot torpedo and a 7-foot torpedo. So I'm sure that the 5-foot is the shortest one, and about 12 to 15 is the longest one. And the part that was kind of weird is that in the list of like 4 or 5 torpedoes was something called a telescoping torpedo, which only had 2 sections in it, and it looked like a telescope, and the nose is a little flatter than the other ones. Most of them looked pretty much sort of baseball bat-ish with a roundish nose, and then some of them did not have tail fins on it, of like the smaller ones, and that didn't make sense until about 3 or 4 pages later when I saw a universal tail assembly, and it looked like a collar with fins on it that you would attach to the torpedoes. Now, if it's the problem with that, and why I think it's kind of a red herring, is if it's a glider, it's not going to be able to carry that much weight. And they were talking about weaponizing space, and what really tipped me off, like years later, in about 2011, the reason I revealed some of this to Simon Shack on pleaseforum.info. And what they did is started a shuttle thread, basically on their own, not taking anything I say for face value, and kind of took off on it. And the reason I did is I was listening to an Alex Jones show where somebody was talking about the weaponizing of space, and that they had actually successfully, armed it. And Alex Jones was saying most people don't understand that there's platforms up there with munitions on it. I don't think anybody used the word torpedo, but at that point, before I went to Simon Shack, I thought, oh no, they actually did it. They actually armed space, and I felt kind of really guilty, and I went on Please Forum. But after a few weeks of seeing that this was all pretty hokey, and that satellites probably don't exist, then it all kind of fell apart and turned into something that I thought was really happening, into something I think is kind of a joke. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is that I do not think that they were actually putting torpedoes in space. But it was there, and I'm not exactly sure why. But I think that, they pretend to invent a lot of things that they may not actually put up if it's not viable. Like the satellites, they pretend all day long that they got satellites, and I don't think they do. So it would fit into that style of a red herring. Yeah, so it's about 3 pages of torpedoes, and I think I've tried to count it in my head, and I don't think there were necessarily more than 11, and I don't think there were less than 11. So that's about how many I would say.
Bob, have you ever seen any of this on Clues Forum yet? I know you're a frequenter of the site.
I've read a lot of the stuff, especially the ISS and other space hoaxes, and the thread on, of course, the shuttles. And yeah, I would definitely agree that there's no way it's going up into space, and in fact, there's no way it's a glider either. When you look at it aerodynamically, you know, for the weight that it's supposed to be, there is no way those little bitty wings could possibly support any type of glide ratio. It would basically be like trying to fly a rock, essentially.
Absolutely.
So and that's another thing. That's another reason why, you know, there are videos out there that show the shuttle touching down, and and you can clearly hear the jet engines after it shuts down. You know, it's sitting there on the runway, and you can hear the jet engines. And honestly, you know, to bring in a plane dead stick, I mean, I understand that NASA supposedly has the best pilots in the world, but I don't think people really understand the talent that would be required to bring in an object like that with little bitty wings, virtually zero glide capability, in a condition called dead stick, which is no power. And to be able to touch down so perfectly every single time, to me, I look at that and I just think impossible. It's hard enough to do with a Cessna, let alone something that's a brick like that. So the thing that intrigues me though is what they're calling torpedoes, because the only thing I can think of is maybe it's some sort of, it houses some sort of guidance system, maybe that, you know, after they splash it in the ocean, that it allows you to track. But again, that's complete, you know, conjecture. I have no idea, but it's intriguing that they would actually label them as torpedoes.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is that when they came back into the atmosphere, they had to, I don't know if you've ever seen like the breakup film from Columbia, but basically they have to almost create like a fireworks display. So that's the only thing I could think of, is that they had something that they would shoot off that would kind of give the impression as we're coming out of the atmosphere on the way back, or we're going through with this heat shield, or I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm kind of lost as far as that all goes too.
Yeah, I kind of am too.
So James, the whole time you've been, say, the last 30 years, whenever you see something about the shuttle, what was your kind of mindset in watching it all?
To be honest, I kind of blanked it out of my mind, and it wasn't really until actually Alex Jones was mentioning it that it brought it to my attention. And at that time I didn't even realize that there were so many missions, like 120 or something like that, which is totally ridiculous. This, part of it also is the pressman that did the job ended up being a serial killer. So a lot of times when I think about this, it brings up that, and that's the last thing I want to think about. But whatever. But I agree that I think that there is definitely a jet engine in what they call the cargo space. And also, as far as the scale, I always felt that the scale is wrong. And I've been looking at all the shuttle takeoffs lately at double speed, and it looks far more normal than at regular speed. So in my opinion, what we're looking at is a lot smaller than what they're pretending. And I learned that from 9/11, is if you look at all the footage double speed, it makes more sense, and you can kind of tell, you know, models are being used. But what I do think that it might be a red herring for the public. If the public thinks that they're weaponizing space, that was part of the Star Wars program. They weren't actually doing it, but if the public thinks it's being done, they can justify charging us for it. And I did find on the internet at some point we had sold the manual or sold the plans to the Russians for about $500. And what they did is build their own shuttle, which was called the Baran. and flew it only once and pretended to do it on automatic pilot. And this manual might have been a propaganda piece for the Russians, saying that if you buy this, you can weaponize space along with us, which wouldn't be true. But anybody lower on the totem pole, like me, even I was lower on the totem pole because I was below the security you would need to see that the cockpit only had one person in it, which negates a lot of things being done. One, there's nobody to unload anything. There's no extra astronauts. It's just, one idiot pilot flying the whole thing. And in my opinion, now it really is just a single person jet. And I'm not sure if it's just a prompt, they just do it for the landings, or if it has any functions. The other thing about the torpedoes that I have a problem with is there really didn't seem to be any method of deployment. There were no torpedo tubes. And there was one picture of the robot arm that they pretend to have in there, but I tried to trace out the arm being attached to anything, which would mean that it would be a functional piece, and I never saw that. So I'm a little suspicious of the robot arm too myself, because I had learned when I'm doing manuals to trace out the electronics and the pneumatics and hydraulics. And hydraulics is usually always used for the brakes. Pneumatics is not. Well, actually, hydraulics is always used for the brakes. You can't do pneumatic for brakes. And I remember asking a lot of these questions.
Yeah, James.
So,
just out of curiosity, did you did NASA give you other contracts to do any of their graphics work, or was this just a kind of a one-time deal?
It was a one-time deal, and it was actually the print shop that got the job, not me. I was just an employee. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
And,
okay. I don't think there's a problem with me saying it. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, especially if you weren't signing any confidentiality agreements or anything like that, because it sounds like what they would probably come back and say is, well, this is the plans for one of our mock-ups, and I understand you can actually buy those mock-ups. They're pretty expensive, but they're like full-size mock-ups for the model. And so I was, that's what I'm thinking it may have been, even though I seriously doubt, the real ones would exist. It just seems to me that it would be awfully strange for NASA to, contract an outside job for, for documentation on something that is considered at least secret at the very least, and probably more like a top secret thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't know who would even get the manuals. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to me that you would even need to print any extra manuals, considering that the only people that are going to be flying them are the astronauts at NASA.
Well, it could be for distribution, like JPL or something like that. Other agencies for design. It's hard to say. One other thing, James, when you were on Clues Forum, what name did you post under?
Oh, James Fogg. I always make sure that it's my real name.
Okay.
Because I could get, if what I wasn't saying wasn't true, then I could kind of get in trouble for it. But in my opinion, there are elements of fraud, and if you do see something that's fraudulent, you are actually bound by law to report it. And that would be overbilling. Like if they're billing for 7 seats and they're doing one, that's an instance of overbilling. And you're right. I could never figure out myself why they would print a manual like that. Like, for who? That's why I'm a little suspicious about it myself. Well, but what I was told about my job straight up is that, and I was printing confidential stuff, like maybe an 1/8 or a 1/16 of every job I did was, classified. So it was a normal part of my job to photograph classified material.
So who else did you do jobs for? Just if you can give us an example of a classified job.
Project for a New American Century, which there's supposedly a 1996 version of Project for a New American Century, but I photographed one that was in 1980-81, so that's been going on a long time, and that was definitely secret, and nobody was supposed to know about that. So yeah, Project for a New American Century has been going along at least 15 years longer than they're telling you. That's pretty important in my opinion. And I did actually read every page of the Project for a New American Century because I learned to read really fast. And if when you're reading something that most people are not going to see, you pay attention, you know, so that maybe 30 years later you can remember it, like I'm doing now. And my opinion on that, when I look at the wars and a lot of invading in different countries, you know, my opinion, they're just going down the list. And war is not really about the person's raw materials, because we tend to waste so much. Like when they took over America from the Indians, or the American Indians, they just slaughtered the buffalo and pretty much wasted a lot of stuff. Because people talk about invading a country for its oil, which would only make sense if we didn't waste oil. In my opinion, it's much more psychological and cultural. And if you read Project for a New American Century, it's more trying to disrupt the cultural ties. What binds a country together is a lot of its old traditions that go back a long time, maybe hundreds of years. And you can't really take that culture over until you break their spirit, which is what they did to the American Indians by killing all the buffalo and wasting it to the point where they just snapped and didn't want to have anything to do with us. And it actually did. This is a quote from somebody high up with 4 stars, that he was taking the tour of Pakistan, and Bangladesh is part of that, and he was describing the poorer section and how filthy it was, how badly the people were being treated, and he talked about the smell and how bad the smell was. And then he finally said, if you wanted to give the world an enema, Bangladesh is where you would stick the tube. And this really, in my opinion, sets the tone. It was for the Project for a New American Century. And the reason that I read it is that it was handwritten and it was crooked. And as a graphics cameraman, I had to make a decision about either to straighten it or leave it crooked. And under no normal circumstances would you ever leave a page that's crooked. You'd straighten it out before you give it to the pressman. And I remember Randy coming back with the plate, and it's crooked. He's just kind of waving it. He's not saying anything. He's like, you know, are you kidding me? You know, it's freaking crooked. I'm like, no, dude, you gotta understand what it says on that. And so we read it and went through that whole story, and I read it again. And then it came to that quote, you know, if you want to give the world an animal, Bangladesh is where you would stick the tube. And basically talked about clearing things out. And like the value of colonialism, like they're better off if we go in there and clear it out, because what exists there, you know, culturally is really disgusting. And it just seemed to me like one of the reasons for invading countries. They take somebody high up and put them, you know, and send them into the worst part of that country, and of course they get a bad, you know, impression about the people running it. But the problem is, you know, they've got slums at home here that are just as bad, and, you know, none of the Indians survived, which is much worse than living in bad conditions, which is not living at all. So it's the hypocrisy of the Project for a New American Century that offended me the most, and I really didn't like printing it.
Do you remember some of the main writers of it, or the authors of the book itself?
No, unfortunately, but I do remember the cover being exactly the same as the one that's in 1996. And the problem with remembering a lot of the details is I was not familiar with the countries they were talking about. Because I think most of them were in the Middle East, and I wasn't familiar with Pakistan, but I was familiar with Bangladesh because of one of the Beatles guys. He did George Harrison did a thing on Bangladesh.
The concert for Bangladesh. Yes.
Yeah, so I was aware, you know, I was familiar with that one, so it was easy to remember. And I'm reading stuff kind of on the go and pretty fast, so it's very hard to remember details. And in the 1980s, I probably could have told you that, but now probably not.
So it would have been probably around the time of Reagan then.
Oh, it was definitely Reagan, and in my opinion, the attitude was very Reaganish. You know, really kind of very arrogant, in my opinion. Our culture is better than other people's cultures because look at what they do as a tradition. And our traditions are just as nasty, really. Um, so I'm not explaining it. Well, no, I'm sort of explaining it well. But that's another example of something, that I photographed that was confidential at the time.
Right, and I can understand that because it wasn't until 16 years after that that the actual real document is admitted to have been created.
Yeah, and in my opinion, it was more of a periodical, like this was that year's report for the project for a new American century. And what bothered me most is the title. I actually got it and thought it was a typo, and asked my supervisor. I said, you should check with the people before I print this because it should say Project for a New Century in America. Why didn't it say Project for a New American Century? That's a pretty pompous to me. It's saying that the entire century is going to be American, really. And project just didn't really say anything. It didn't describe anything about the contents. Project could be a building project, housing project. What do they mean project? In my opinion, it's working. What they mean by a project, and they're not really admitting it, is working on people's cultures to the point where they kind of break, or you disrupt the culture so it doesn't have unity, and you're not dealing with somebody that's unified. That's my opinion about why they called it Project for a New American Century.
Okay, and then it was around that same time that you saw the shuttle manual.
Correct. Yeah, I only worked there for a year, I think starting in 1980 and probably ending around the summer of 1981 or so.
Okay. Bob, any other questions? Or?
No, not really. It's been interesting, but I will go back and reread some of your threads on Clues Forum. When I heard the name, before the show, I said, where do I know that name from? And now I know. Now I remember.
Yeah, it's only about 4 posts, and what I did is I talked to Simon Jack in an email behind the scenes first, and mentioned it. Then he started his investigation, and I wasn't sure where he was going with it. But what I felt was good about it is he didn't take what I'm saying at face value, and he didn't base the research on what I'm saying because I can't reproduce it. And that's not as valuable as something that everybody can get their hands on. And what he's doing is looking at footage that everybody has. And in my opinion, that's much better. I'm just, mentioning it and saying that if you look into it, you're going to find at least irregularities. I didn't get the joke when I reported it to Simon Shack that, you can't put things in space like that. I thought, boy, this is something that's really happening. I better warn people. So you can be really close to something and still not get the joke.
Yeah. Well, Clues Forum is they are very much proof oriented. They do not take anything on face value from anybody. They go into it very deeply, and I'm sure it's nothing personal against you, but if it is not something that can't be backed up, they will simply reject it, and in fact, they will ultimately ban you if you keep trying to present stuff like that with them.
Yeah. So what I did is I just presented what I had, and then just left it alone and let them kind of go. And I felt, that their investigation was so much better than anything I would come up with that I just, let them go. And then there's the other thing, they can't prove what I'm saying, so. All I can really do is suggest it and then let other people look into it. And, I think they found a lot immediately, which proves that at least something was goofy about the situation.
Right.
And that's what I'm offering is something ain't right. You can't put torpedoes in a glider anyway. And then also if the space shuttle's smaller than we're thinking, and I think it is, you only got room for an engine.
Yeah.
So,
I know that they also posited the idea that that's one of the reasons that they keep people so far away from the shuttle launches is so that they can't actually see the real scale of what's actually on there. So even though what you presented is not necessarily tangible or provable, it can be kind of included in sort of a preponderance of evidence in building a case, and it can also be kind of referenced for, positing other possibilities as well.
Well, that's how I look at it, and I think one of the important things for me to get out of it is that there's a possibility that there was one driver, because to me, it never made a lot of sense. And if we look at the Challenger disaster, which was in '86,
Right.
I've got video evidence that I haven't put out in a video yet, but I still have the evidence that there was a pod that came down with a parachute that they never mention on TV or mention anymore. And a lot of people have assumed that maybe these 6 people who technically died, or is it 7? Might be 7.
7 ones that are all alive still.
Right, and I'm sure you've seen that. James, have you seen the pictures of Judith Resnick and some of these other people that are technically still living?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I say is the value of at least listening to what I have to say, because you eventually start finding things like that. Now my opinion about the whole space thing in general is that it's a legal maneuver in that if I don't pretend there's a man on top, it's a missile. If I pretend there's a man on top, it's a spaceship. If it's a missile, then I have a lot of legal responsibility. Setting a missile off is an act of aggression, and it's part of international law. If I'm just pretending to send spaceships, I can do that all day, and I'm not really violating any laws. And I have a trouble with the amount of how violent it would be inside of a spaceship on top of a rocket. And I think you'd snap your neck. I have serious doubts to whether a human body could ever actually be put on a space capsule without, breaking your neck.
Yeah, you and I both. And on top of that, if you look at Apollo 11, the 3 of them who supposedly went up back in '69, being Aldrin and Armstrong and Collins, Collins didn't go on the trip for Apollo 6, I think it was 6 or 8, maybe it was 8, Apollo 8, because he had just had back surgery. And that was at the end, December of '68. So for him to go up then in July of '69, you're talking 7 months later, he recovered from back surgery to the point that they put him up there to experience the unimaginable amount of G's that you would go through. You would need to be in tip-top shape, not 7 months out from back surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally don't believe there's ever actually been a man on the back of a rocket, because I think they know, you break your neck. So that's what I mean about a multifaceted red herring. It's really hard to know, what I'm saying is actually true or just a hoax. But I know that I saw it, and for me, I could pass a lie detector test, or I wouldn't be saying this because I know the laws. But I also know that it would be in a way against the law for me not to report fraud. So, in my opinion, that outweighs it, and that's my out. I think my legal out. And I've worked with federal investigators in banking, and I actually really like them. And in my opinion, there's a lot of people who in the government who would actually like their benefits instead of having them be absconded by this fake space stuff, and the government can always just do something better. If we as citizens expose tomfoolery, then, lucky for them, eventually they'll go on to do something more legitimate, which is what they should be doing. It's not fair to let these kind of hoaxes go on because everybody's brought down a notch, and that's just not right,
No. And I think they do a good job of putting out a lot of different stories or a lot of different versions. It's the same thing with 9/11, because we'll probably never come to the truth because there's so many things put out there that to find the truth at this point would be incredibly impossible. We know that it's not the official story, but beyond that, you can find hired actors who say different things. You can find news media who was in on it who say different things. So it's almost like if we put out 15 different stories, then there's 15 different actual versions of the story, meaning you'll never come to a conclusion. You may be able to prove one is wrong and one is true, but you still got the other 13 versions to siphon through. I just think that's the way they operate. So same thing in this case. They could have had a couple people put out different manuals, who knows, to where you've got one idea of something you saw, but we might find another person who says, well, I saw a manual that said this. And so from that, there is no truth.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I wanted to make a point is why did they let an idiot like me see that? And I think that's part of the red herring is to get me to think that this is possible because I mean I literally so upset by what I saw, and one project for a New American Century really was just horrifying. I mean I really didn't like this whole invade the world and clean it up kind of attitude. And I really did tell people in the 80s, all my close friends, about this kind of stuff, and nobody really cares, and that part really bothered me. But showing some schmuck like me, a bunch of torpedoes is a great way to be an alarmist. Because I'm not going to know. I'm just some idiot. I see it and I think it's true, and it's actually one of the reasons I never had kids. Is I'm like, oh, they're going to bomb us to death and all like that. And I mean, a lot of it really affected my demeanor in general, made me kind of paranoid and unsociable, and I bought the joke. So I mean, in a lot of ways, this joke was on me. And it wasn't until Simon Shack looked at it from a completely objective and distant way that I went, wait, maybe this is a joke. And that's kind of why I really like him so much. Is that he got me to see something I was afraid of is something not to be afraid of. And also with the whole space thing, it's not that we're going to be able to figure out exactly what's going on, but we can certainly figure out that it's a freaking hoax. And that's enough for me. It's like, it's a big joke. Like in the flat Earth, I just know it's not a globe. And so I don't need, I don't need to be technical about it. I relax. I'm done now. I can live. And I deeply respect. And I think that in Clues Forum, they came around to the same conclusion. I think at least they were getting there. Because once you start looking at the space program, I mean, in some ways, I think I was kind of at least the 100th monkey, or I topped the 100th monkey on the shoulder in just the right way, on just the right day to get him to go, hey, let me look over here and find this, And it was kind of a snowball effect. I can't take credit for it, but at least something happened by me telling somebody.
Yeah.
So,
James, just out of curiosity, obviously you've been reading Clues Forum for a while, as have I, and I found it surprising, basically, that Simon started a new thread talking about the discredit by association, the flat Earth movement, and of course at the very beginning of that he mentioned, jeranism and some of the stuff that's being said. And I know that he definitely has some problems with the flat Earth model, and he's posted them basically. And we're going to talk about those a little bit. But I'm wondering, do you think that Simon has given indications, as I do, that he may be of the mind of a geocentrist, if nothing else? Maybe not flat Earth, but he seems to me that he's pretty convinced that we're not rotating at all, or going around the sun, moving in any direction at all. So to me, that sounds like somebody that would be a geocentrist. Would you kind of have that opinion of him also?
I actually, well, yeah. Let me explain this. As far as Clues Forum, I like Simon Shack, but there's a lot of contention and a lot of arguing, and I kind of have a limited amount of patience. So it was pretty much around 2011. Once I posted these things, I kind of moved on because it tends to take a long time to go through stuff, and and also there's the theory that some of these sites are actually honeypot sites, and that some of the accounts are sock puppet. And I'm not saying that about that one in general. I'm just saying in general these websites can be government run. So I've always had a distance from it, but you got to do what you got to do. And I mean, if I have to poke people into doing something about it, that's what I got to do, regardless of what my opinion is about what's going on behind the scenes. So I take it all with a grain of salt, and I haven't been on Cruise Forum in years because I just switched over to YouTube videos. And the comment section on YouTube videos are bad enough. So if you multiply that, that's kind of a truther website. So,
Okay,
the reason I like Simon Shack is that he just at least looked into it, and it seemed to crack the egg a little bit, and that's what I'm glad about. And the rest of it, I'm not going to broach the subject. It's
Yeah.
it's like a friend you don't want to argue with anymore. It's like, oh, you're my friend, forget it.
Right. So you basically haven't seen, or maybe you're still reading it, I don't know, but you haven't seen him basically come out and say that he does not believe that the Earth is spinning or whizzing around the sun or anything like that. I've seen those posts, and that's why it struck me as so odd that he would, be seemingly so adamant against, the flat Earth movement. But Simon is a smart guy, and I think that what he probably is doing is something to the effect of, he's got some other great investigators on there. Hoi Polloi, of course, is he's kind of his right-hand man. And it's interesting because Hoy has taken a position seemingly opposite. He hasn't come right out and stated it, but he's taken a position opposite, and he wants to present more evidence towards the flat Earth, which I think is interesting. So I think maybe what Simon is doing is he probably might think that the world is flat, and I don't know that, but I think maybe he does. And I think that maybe what he's doing is by taking the devil's advocate position, so to speak, he is giving his investigators the opportunity to, present evidence, both pro and con, and kind of guide the discussion, if you will. Because Simon is very smart. He's always a few steps ahead of people, and that's kind of been my take on it anyway. So I was just wondering if you were kind of in agreement with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is a lot of his character. I should actually go on there and check it out, see what they're writing. But I think we're already there. The people that I watch are like my perspective and things like that, and I'm already convinced. And actually, to be honest with you, what got me into it was a video by a person named Fernie Boy 100. And it was a 20-minute video on how the Earth is not spinning, rotating, or something like that. And it's he doesn't have it posted anymore. But I watched it at least 6 times, and I was still, I still thought, we were on a globe and all that kind of junk. But as soon as I looked at that, it made sense that the world wasn't moving. And then from there, I just, I said, let's look at the flat Earth videos, and at that time there were only 2. One with the guy saying that a plumb bob wouldn't work, and for me, that's really what did it. Is that the point of parallel gravity? And I know the building codes say that you have to build in parallel lines. You can't cheat, the lines in so that they meet at the center of the Earth. And that's the thing, is parallel lines never meet. So if you're building in parallel lines, you're negating it being a round globe. Yeah, absolutely. And every time you go away from it and square it, you're proving the Earth is flatter and flatter and flatter and flatter. So it's really the building codes that did it for me. The law is the law, and it's illegal. It's illegal to pitch stuff out to the center of gravity because it will fall. And that's it.
Yeah, in my most recent video, I put a little section on surveying in there where they flat out say that we survey as if the Earth was flat. That's how they go about their surveying. But that the surface of a globe, since all areas pull to the center, is essentially flat, which is not true at all, except for if you're building as if the Earth is flat, then it would be true.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty funny. Yeah, I know that Simon Shack, Bob, he's the one that says, I work for NASA?
No, not at all.
That's Matt Powerland.
No, I thought maybe I'm reading I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm talking about
Simon
a
is a
different post.
musician. Simon is a musician and an artist, but yeah, he's a musician.
Yeah.
No, who's the one that said in the Clues forum that they think that this is all disinfo by disassociation or whatever that was?
Oh, that would be Simon that started that thread.
Now, I
Okay.
think in there he says people
Oh,
like,
that you work for NASA.
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Ah,
Yeah, okay, yes, that would be Simon, and yeah, I think that's pretty rampant speculation on his part. So I wouldn't really, take that. Again, I think he's playing devil's advocate, to be honest with you.
Right. No, and that's, I mean, of course, anyone who did work for NASA and didn't want people to know would come out and say, I don't work for NASA, of course. But, I just hope people understand that my wife and I came to this conclusion purely on our own, made these videos purely under our own will and our own ideas. And the reason why is because simply to us, it no longer worked to say that we live on a spinning ball. And like James said, from there, you can draw a lot of different ideas or come to a lot of different conclusions that kind of seem to all match up. Just like in my videos where I explain that a globe just simply doesn't work. It just doesn't. And there's nobody, and I will say this with every bit of conviction I can, there is nobody who heard that as a kid and simply just said, oh, okay. Every single person went through that day or two or three or week where they just couldn't wrap their head around it. Wait, we're spinning? We're spinning in a circle, and that's why we see the sunrise and the sunset and the moonrise and the moonset. And because it was a fact and it was a conclusion of science, you eventually, at the age of 8 or 7 or 6, whenever you found it out, just came to the conclusion that it must be true. And then from there, you spent every year of your life being given that information over and over and over again. The globe is in every logo, it's in every commercial, it's on every video, it's on every Super Bowl. So eventually, there is no question in your mind that we live on a spinning ball. And it took until I started to look into some of these things and saw that the NASA missions appeared to be fraud and that I didn't think we went to the moon, that then you start saying, okay, well, if we didn't go to the moon, that means that picture of Earth isn't real. Then you can look at, well, how many pictures of the Earth are there? And besides that one taken in 1972, you're talking this year until the second image of Earth came out. And it all came out after we started talking about the flat Earth. So drawing from that, you start saying, well, why wouldn't they have taken any pictures of Earth throughout all the questions? And if you look back, it's not like people started questioning the moon hoax this year or last year. These things have been questioned since 1970. And the fact that from 1970s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, they never sent a simple rover to the moon to expose the landing spots. Remember that the actual bottom of the LEM stayed on the moon. That didn't fire up with the part of the LEM that went to the reconnection. And all their equipment, from the rovers to all the testing gear, all that stuff is supposedly still there. So why would they have never just simply proven that they went? It would have taken all the questions out of anybody's mind. But the fact that they didn't, and I think the fact that they still don't, and why have they moved on to now it's Mars? There is no question about the moon anymore. They say it would be worthless. Been there, done that. They don't want to go there at all. In fact, the hardest pusher to get people to go to Mars is Buzz Aldrin, who says, don't go to the moon. It's worthless. It's pointless. Go to Mars. And in my opinion, the reason is because if they can fake anything else, it's going to be a landing on Mars. They could not fake the moon landing again. There'd be too many people asking questions like, well, turn a telescope towards Earth, or turn a camera towards Earth and let us watch XYZ. But from Mars, they could fake that.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we're
it
just a
also
little
would be
dot.
better. They should be a lot better at faking it today, so then people will be questioning like, wait a second, why is that space rocket ship doing this on the moon because the other one didn't do that?
Right, and they can
Right.
also they also have the advantage of being able to shoot out in the desert, kind of like the pictures that they take now for the rovers, I think is done somewhere in New Mexico. So they could actually, take a large section of land, or they could do like sort of 360 panoramics as long as it doesn't, identify the land too much. And then they just slap that red filter on the camera and say, bada bing, we got Mars here.
Oh, I think that all they would ever show, too, is inside the biodome. So all they really need to fake is some sort of landing on the Martian surface, and then the transport into the biodome. And from that, they would never really need to show much else. I actually think it would be the easiest thing for them to fake. But even that's tough because people are so smart. Although people are really smart, and yet they still believe the nonsense that comes back from the Apollo missions, which is just complete and total nonsense. They lost every bit of paperwork. They lost the plans for the Saturn V. They lost the telemetry data, which is really the data that could prove whether or not they were faking it. They've edited the transcripts and the audio files that they have from those trips. So at this point, it's easy for me to say they never went to the moon. And so when I hear things like what James said, it's just more info that I like to put into my little processor, and it helps me. It helps me a lot in just hearing that possibly you're talking about a captain's seat with some sort of a joystick with foot pedals and a couple dials. To me, that sounds like possibly some sort of a I don't know. You have to have a lot more dials than that, right, Bob, to have a plane?
Well, yeah, and unless you're flying VFR, and of course, they always seem to, bring those things in, and it's typically VFR conditions, which means visual flight rule, which means basically, you don't have a lot of clouds, or you're not flying in a haze or fog. So if it's just VFR, an absolute minimal a complement of navigation would be required. And of course, again, if they were actually gliding, and like I said, I seriously doubt it. I still think that there's no way, no matter how light they made that craft, that it could come in dead stick. But they would most likely, have it stripped down to a bare minimum avionics, minimum seat, one pilot, to bring it in as light as they can, and it could also be, just a reusable shell.
Yeah, I think it's a prop in general. That's kind of my feeling on the whole thing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And especially the fact that it like you say, it appeared to be much smaller, and I know they posited that over at Clues Forum as well, and that seems logical, and also would be another very good reason why they would keep the crowd so far away from the launches.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And really the landings too. The landings never seem to have the people. Again, I've got video footage of one of the shuttles landing, and they've got people lined up against a fence structure, and as you watch the landing, the people never turn their heads. So the people are all frozen, looking in a certain direction, and they have this thing come in and land and roll up to its stop with its parachute or whatever, but the people who are watching never move their heads in time with the thing landing. So there's definitely some questions as to what exactly is going on there.
Probably a CGI crowd.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I think there's definitely matting going on there. If there's a few launch videos that I looked at recently, and if you speed it up double speed, the spaceship looks normal. It's much more believable. In fact, the smoke looks much more believable. And if you look at the normal speed, the way they do it, the smoke doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be curling around as slowly as it does. If you look at a double speed, it looks normal, and the people are moving fast, which is definitely matting. Those are two different shots.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And another thing that you say there, James, is I said this before, that if it was a real rocket, and if you compare it to any scale rocket, model rocket, or anything like that, they come off the ground basically like a bat out of hell. They come up so quick because they have the majority of the ground to work against. They have the majority of the atmosphere, and if anybody was actually in that, they would be crushed to death instantly by the G-force. So I think that NASA probably thought that and said, well, okay, so let's actually slow this down or scale it so that it appears that it's going up slower, because otherwise people are going to say, wow, if they see that rocket go up at full speed, they're going to wonder how it didn't kill the astronauts.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think that when you play it at normal speed, it appears that the rocket is a helium balloon. That's how slowly it begins to take off, as it just looks like it's floating, and you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, it's got all that torque pouring out from underneath it. That thing should be moving, 3 or 4 times that speed easily. And I've even heard them say how far up they are or whatever, but I mean, if you've watched any launches, you'll see them be at 10 or 11 seconds post-launch, and they just cleared the tower. So you're like, how in the world would it take 10 seconds for this rocket to clear the tower, which is only as tall as the rocket is itself? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does. Go ahead, James.
No, it would fall back to Earth if it takes stuff slowly. I agree. That is a basics of setting off a rocket. It has to take off fast, or else it'll just crash down.
That's one thing that Jaron, you and I talked about one day, because you had mentioned something about it. Like it's like, wow, the spacecraft that went up and blew up, and you were saying, wow, that looks like some sort of a helium or hydrogen explosion. I think you said it was a helium explosion, right?
Oh, that's the SpaceX one.
Right. Well, and same thing. And we had talked about the possibility that maybe they've got the top of that thing filled with helium to keep it stable vertically, instead of just kind of tumbling out, especially when you consider how slow the launch speeds seem to be. It would seem to me that with the rocket supposedly going up that fast, and if it was actually a jet vertical takeoff and landing system like they use on the Harrier jump jets, that they would need to have some sort of additional stability. And filling the top of that rocket full of helium gas would definitely, in my mind anyway, would definitely tend to give a stabilizing element. And of course, when it blew up, it'll also make a very big explosion, and that's where you made the observation that you thought that may have been something that had happened.
Yeah, well, definitely with the SpaceX one. I mean, if you think about something that is going to explode and catch on fire like an airplane or something, all the things that are in there cannot just disappear. Whereas if you watch that SpaceX explosion, it appears that there's nothing inside of it. And one of the crazy things that I found out about that particular launch was across the country they had high school students, and I think some junior high as well, make experiments that would go to space. And so there was like this 2-year project where all these schools made all these science experiments, and that's what was in the SpaceX launch. So they're flying all these space experiments that these kids have spent 2 years on. They're sending them all to the space station so that they can do all these experiments, and it so happens that that spaceship blows up. So, sorry if you spent 2 years on that project, but your project is incinerated. But if you watch that video, that thing's flying in the air and just poof. It looks like it becomes fragments of little tiny fiberglass as if the entire thing was empty.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It just didn't look right in any way, shape, or form.
I have one little launch queued up here. I'm going to see if I can show it on my screen. You tell me if it's working or not.
Okay.
Let's see here. Do you see my screen?
I see your mouse. That's about it.
On the black screen again?
Yep.
What are you sharing? Are you sharing a window?
Yeah, I'm trying to show my YouTube video here. Let me see.
Well, if you can send the link over in the private chat, I can put it up on mine.
Sure, let's do that, because I don't know why it always shows that on mine, what I'm doing wrong.
Okay.
Let me see where the chat is.
It's probably because you're on a Windows computer.
That is true.
So what are you using, Linux or what?
I'm on Mac.
Ah, okay.
Okay, I posted it over there, Bob.
All right. So let me bring it up. And I will now share it. All right, ready?
Ready.
Here we go. Whoops.
I don't see anything yet, Bob.
So far, all I see is just your
I
logo.
just see a flat Earth. That's it.
There we go.
go.
Okay.
So if you start that and just watch this space shuttle take off. Whoa.
Oh, that's
Can you
moving
rewind it?
slow.
Can you rewind it one more time?
Sure.
Oh man, all those nice mustache.
Okay. So it's getting ready to blast off here.
That's moving slow. Oh, leaning forward.
Yeah, exactly.
It's rocking.
See
Back
it
and
rocking?
forth. Yeah.
And now watch it. Look at it flying forward.
Yeah, you know, that's funny because they also discuss that very thing, how it seems to kind of skew to the side.
Yeah, it glides. It
Yeah.
doesn't operate as a rocket would.
No.
And TJ, you said you even saw it was rocking on the pad, huh?
Yeah, it leaned forward and then it went back.
That's probably when they all jumped in the slide to slide down to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Although kind of what James is saying, maybe there's that one, so there's one person in that flyer right now, and maybe it's several times smaller than we think. And that one person can get away from it whenever they need to, if they needed to, because it's just that one pilot. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But
No,
then if you watch the Columbia, like I said, or the Challenger, I mean, and I'll have to put that video out soon to show you. It is a clear deception because the host of the TV news show that is showing the clips knows about the disaster ahead of time, and I can show that clearly, and then sees the parachute come down and even mentions it, and then they just cut to a different scene and it's never mentioned again. And so it makes me question whether or not there was. It looks like there's one person that was saved in that accident. I don't think the pod would have come down with 6 people inside of it, or 7, excuse me, and a parachute. So
Yeah, they'll probably say it was something like the black box or the flight recorder that automatically ejects. I mean, that would honestly, I think that's probably what they would say it was.
I agree. Oh, this is a good view here too. You
Yeah,
can see
there
it
it's
leaning like
moving.
crazy. See how much it's drifting left there?
Yeah,
Pretty insane.
yeah. Then the long distance shots, and even there, it seems, like it's going extremely slow.
Oh, absolutely. And I even have some reports from, there was one airplane that was supposed to take off about 2 hours before it actually did, and the pilot admits that NASA had called them and said, can you hold off on your takeoff? We want the people that are in the plane to see the launch. And so they actually held this plane for like 2 hours and then let it take off. And from there, supposedly, the people on the plane were able to film the launch.
The film that ends quickly, the one that just cuts off.
Right.
Yeah, and again, I agree. I think that would look a lot more realistic if you doubled the speed.
Yeah, that's something I've never done. I can't wait to play with some stuff like that because I'd never thought about it being slowed down for any reason.
Now,
So back that up a little bit. So
yeah, I was going to say,
have
this
the rockets on, because this is like the second video where I've seen like some purple haze or whatever, white.
Yeah, and look at the angle of that too, TJ. I mean, it looks to me like at that angle it would try to be pushing the bottom of the rocket out from underneath it. Let's go back and look at that again, because look at the thrust. It's actually at an angle, and it would be pushing against the lower part of that rocket. Highly suspicious.
It does not look real at all.
No. Might have to include this on the ISS watch.
None of these crowds ever look real. Always looks like a mess to me.
Yeah.
Lots of military personnel. It looks like Secret Service agents, CIA.
Yeah, the guy right there in the front. You see that guy with he's got the suit, the tie, the glasses.
Yeah.
You're not there just to watch.
Yeah.
And this is another launch here. Yeah.
Yeah, that just big smoke, that's for sure. Yeah, I think that's the first launch I've ever seen that showed the exhaust gases coming off the back of the shuttle at an angle, kind of perpendicular, well, to some degree, to the rocket itself. And it seems to me at that bottom part of the rocket, it would just have a tendency to try and kick it right out from underneath it. Of course, I'm no aeronautical engineer, but it just seems really suspect. So, yep.
Hey, I'm
Another
back.
thing is, when that thing takes off, you've got people in the crowd there that are talking to each other and pointing and talking and pointing. You could not talk to anyone with the sound that would come roaring through there.
Oh yeah, even at that distance, it's supposed to be something like 140 decibels at least.
Yeah,
higher.
It's surprising it wouldn't knock you on the floor.
Oh yeah. Have you ever been to a drag race? At the drag races, and
I've been to a monster truck rally before, and we walked in, and they offered my son and I earplugs. I'm like, no, we're fine. I didn't hear for a month after that.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I ever went to Bandimere Speedway here in Colorado and watched those Top Fuel funny cars take off, even though I knew they were going to be loud, it scared the crap out of me when this thing took off from the line. So, yeah, I can only imagine what a rocket like that would sound like. It would be ungodly, deafening.
Did you say you know the exact decibel rate that they say it comes through at?
I don't know the exact decibel rate, but I know it's up there. It's loud, and it would have to be.
I would have to look at that versus what they say is inside of an arena at a monster truck, because I know for a fact there is no way I could have talked to the person sitting next to me during it. There's just no possible way.
Yeah.
It was just way too loud. So, well, James, I do appreciate you coming on and talking to us about what you saw, and also I appreciate that you're saying not to take my word for it, but to just include it with our other research and come to our own conclusions, which is what I've tried to voice in every one of my videos. Is there's certainly nothing that I'm saying that I'm telling everybody you better believe this, you better take my word for it. I'm simply saying these are things that I've heard, these are things I've learned, and I think we need to take every bit that we can in and help us draw conclusions on our own and not just take every word for it that comes from Washington, D.C.,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I didn't even see the joke in what I'm doing, so I can, only tell you what I saw. As far as what it means, I don't know. What I was going to say, the last thing is, I don't actually think there is any pilot in it when they set the rocket off. I think there's only a pilot in it when they do the pretend landings, and that is a different vehicle. The reason is that what's called the Wonder Bolt, and Simon Shack found that, and that they're saying that the shuttle itself is attached to the rocket by one tiny exploding bolt, and I think
it's got that tiny little triangle-shaped connector.
It would rip off if there was any weight in that thing, or if it was as big as they're saying. It would just break right off, in my opinion. So it has to be empty. It has to be made of aluminum, and something. It has to be something way different than what they're telling us. It can't have the weight
That makes
And
a
it
lot of
all,
sense to me. Okay, so yeah, so you're saying that basically they would have models of this thing, and the one that takes off probably gets dumped in the ocean eventually out of sight,
yeah.
and then later, 2 weeks later or 10 days later, whenever they're going to bring it back, then a different model would be dropped off of a plane or released from a plane up high and then glided down and landed via a engine or not, um, but probably a different machine altogether.
Yeah, and it might be that it is designed actually just to land, and that the because it got to have an engine in it, and those landing videos you can clearly hear it. So there's got to be an engine, but it might be so limited to where it's not actually flying around. It just comes in for the landing. I don't know. I'm guessing on that one, but what my suspicion is
Educated guesses. Educated guesses.
yes. But I strongly believe that there has to be something different. Like the cockpit might be that I saw with one person in it is for the landings, which is a different vehicle than the rest of it that I photographed. And the scales, I can't be sure of the scales. The one thing though that I think is important is that I really looked at the flaps and the electronics going from the flaps and was able to actually trace out the electronics all the way pretty much to what should be the cockpit, where it terminates just before the cockpit. And that was very similar to what I had seen in DC-10s. So that made sense. And also the braking system, I did follow the hydraulics actually down, the leg all the way to the wheel. And I used to remember whether they were disc brakes or drum brakes, and unfortunately I can't remember at the moment. But there's one kind of brake you can't use on an airplane, and I forget what it is. I think it might be drum brakes or disc brakes, but right now I'd hate to say which one because I just can't remember anymore.
And I'll have to look that up because, again, it could be just a bunch of misinfo or disinfo put out there on purpose because I believe the NASA official story is that none of those had brakes at all, which is
no,
the reason. Isn't that the reason they shoot out the parachute?
No, it
Stop
has
it?
no, the brakes are definitely there. They admit to that because any plane has to have brakes on its tires. What it is, the parachutes just help slow it down to the point where the brakes don't fry.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. I don't think you can't have one without. They have to have brakes on those tires. Period.
Yeah, I
But
love it because it's just more stuff for me to research and look into and more ammo for the arsenal,
yeah, exactly.
TJ, you have anything final you want to ask James here?
Nope, don't have anything to ask. But I did see that video that Bob talked about earlier in the show about the shuttle coming in, and you can hear the engine. And you can also see on some of the videos what seems to be a tiny bit of a trail behind it, which seems to come from plane engines. And so I watched quite a few different videos just trying to make sure I'm not listening to like some sound effects someone put in or capturing some other plane, but it wouldn't make sense that that shuttle was coming in and some other jet plane was flying back close by.
Well, there actually is several videos of there's a jet plane that flies right next to it.
Yeah, the little fighter escort.
Yeah, there's like a little fighter plane that flies directly next to it. I don't know
but
why.
In the one that I'm talking about, that isn't happening, and they also never land them simultaneously. So this one, it lands, it taxis, it rolls out, and then it sits there, and then you can actually hear the engine shut down.
Right.
So I mean, it's like, okay, that's pretty good for not supposed to have jet engines on it.
And again, I'm not saying that I've seen all 135 missions, but has anyone ever seen the astronauts get out of the shuttle?
Nope.
I've never seen it. So just very peculiar that they would show you the landing. And if you think about Air Force One landing, the big thing is the opening of the door, here comes the president, everybody waves. So you're telling me not one time would they have taken the time to open the door of the shuttle and let everybody wave at the returning astronauts? I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, you would think that they would do that, but No.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever done that. So these are the kind of things, these little clues that I hope people see and recognize, and people that are huge NASA fans and people that make every excuse in the book for them, and we all know there's a ton of them that will explain every single thing away, every anomaly that you can find in any Apollo mission, they will be able to explain away. But when you ask them something like this, how could they explain away 135 landings and not, well, 133, I guess, if you don't count the two that didn't quite make it back. But 133 landings, and not once did they take the photo op to have everybody welcome back these astronauts that are our heroes, quote unquote, is preposterous. It's absolutely insanity that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, somebody in the chat says, I thought the astronauts came back in a pod with a parachute. And I know they do sometimes, but there would also, obviously, there has to be somebody in the shuttle, you would think, and maybe
the
he's
pod
just
with
not considered it.
Yeah, what drops in the water should be any kind of rocketed mission that doesn't go in a shuttle. And then any shuttle mission comes home with a landing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So there's a ton of times that the thing drops in the water. But that's like Apollo missions, all the Mercury missions, those kind of things that were done with them in a little pod that then has to somehow come through the 2,500 to 4,500 degree Fahrenheit, plasma re-entry, and they just go through that just fine, and then their parachutes open and they land out in the middle of the ocean, and they go open the door and welcome back, you guys are home. But they have a couple times made sure to show that footage on TV, right? We've all seen that before as they open the pod and out comes your astronauts. So why don't we get to see the same thing when the shuttle lands?
Yeah, and obviously there has to be somebody in there because somebody's got to land that big beast. But maybe he's just, a big nobody.
Who knows? Yeah, I have no idea. So, Bob, you have any final questions for Mr. Fogg?
No, I don't. Thank you, James, for joining us and kind of giving us a little insight on what you saw, and we do appreciate it. And don't have any other questions.
Yeah, me neither, James. I thank you for coming on, and I'll keep you in contact because as we discover more things, maybe we'll have more questions, and then also maybe something else will pop back into your mind that you think would be important for us all to know as we continue to research this stuff and try to prove to everyone that NASA isn't quite everything they are cracked up to be.
Exactly. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I really appreciate this. It's I've tried to bend people's ear on this stuff, and the thing is they don't know if I'm telling the truth or not. But my thing is I saw it and I have to say something. To say nothing is not really an option for me. And I used to be a lot of guilt, like, I thought this is part of, weapons of mass destruction type thing, so it really is pretty upsetting. But I always understand other people's position. If you don't see it, you can't know, and it does sound a little fantastic, and everybody's got stories and stuff like that, but, I saw it, so I have to say it, and there you go. But I just appreciate you listening, so there you go.
All right, well, thanks again. We appreciate it, and hopefully we will talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Good night.
Bye, James.
Bye-bye, James.
All right, good night.
All right.
All right, we back?
We are back.
Okay, so interesting, some of the things he's got to say. Just for a recap, because, again, I was a little bit confused by some of it. So he's saying that his job was to take photographs of the manual and then send those photographs off to some sort of printer. Is that what you got out of it?
Well, they were the printers, but apparently he was making duplicates either for recreating the manual for somebody else or something like that. But that's kind of what I got out of it.
Okay. And then basically what he's saying he saw was some sort of apparatus that contained 11 torpedoes or something like that?
Yeah, and that That I have no idea, other than if it was some sort of location equipment. Uh,
Yeah, me
and
neither.
yeah, for all we know, it could have been some sort of external propulsion, to help it along. I don't know. It's really hard to say. But
no, and he's not in the position to know what technically a torpedo is either. And he's not
Right.
claiming that he knows that either. So.
Right.
And then the other thing was simply that he thought he saw pictures of the cockpit that were, instead of an area where 6 would sit, or 7, but just an area where 1 would sit with a joystick and some pedals and some knobs, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I got out of it too. So I'm glad that he tells everybody not to just take his word for it, like I've said. And that's certainly not, I didn't have him on the show to say this guy's a truth sayer, a truth teller. Oh, you found one.
Yeah, TJ sent it to me, and apparently they're actually offloading here. So and I've never seen this before.
Me neither.
So
I just made it to that point. Did you see at 6 minutes where it's got some kind of like smoke or heat coming out the back of those engines?
No, but I can go back there. Let's see, 5:30. Is it after that?
Yeah, it's right around 6 because it changes color.
Oh, okay. So let me
So you'll
back
see
it.
it'll zoom in. So to zoom in, and you'll see the heat, smoke, or whatever it is coming out.
What is this supposed to be, an infrared view?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, infrared should show
Heat, a lot of it.
that there's nothing there.
Well, but then again, maybe not, because it supposedly is coming in dead stick. So I don't think that was an infrared view, because
Unless that was like NASA's version of here's the infrared view and you'll see there's no heat,
Yeah.
could be.
which
Could
I wouldn't
be.
put past them at all.
But yeah, look at the wing area on that thing. That's just silly.
Yeah,
So
it
Bob,
is
do you-
smaller than a plane of that size.
Yeah, it just looks like it. Bob, do you understand it all? Because I've now heard it 2 times, and I've actually got a video that I'm almost done with that is kind of about Buzz Aldrin, or I actually call him several things during the video, from Buzzed Aldrin to Buzz Aldrink to you name it. He definitely is not going to be allowed to speak much more, because in his last 2 or 3 speeches that I can find, he is completely plastered out of his mind, and he's saying some things I don't think he's supposed to say. Like in the last 2 times, he's made a point to mention that when they got back on the LEM from the moon's surface, that they repressurized the cabin, and then to make the weight less, they took off their backpacks and threw them out of the LEM onto the surface of the moon, and then closed the door and repressurized again. And that makes no sense, right?
No, it doesn't. Not at all. Because, I mean, you'd have to wonder how they would keep from becoming exposed.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, the temperature inside of there would have been ridiculous.
Well, not only that, the vacuum. I mean, it would suck all the air out of your lungs, or I mean, you would just. I don't think you could live for more than a second exposed to what they say is in deep space.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think you can even go to space, or I mean, obviously we know that, but I mean, these are the kind of things that I almost feel like he's saying by his own conscience, to kind of, he knows he can't come out and say it. That's how you get in trouble. But if you kind of get drunk and let something slip, like this kind of info that should tell anybody who knows anything about space, or anything that they've told us about space, is absolutely impossible. You cannot disconnect yourself from your life support backpack and be able to throw the backpack out of the LEM onto the surface of the moon and then just shut the door. That's not at all possible. And then to think that those guys technically went to sleep for the next 8 hours and then did the launch. Well, how could you have been so sure of the coming launch that you would not need your spacesuit?
Oh, jeez.
It's outrageous. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. So I'm putting out this video to kind of show that there's just no way that they went. And from that, we should be able to come to the conclusion that, well, then there is no pictures of space, or pictures of Earth from space. Is this the one where the bag drops?
Yeah. This is the one where they drop the tool bag and it hits the image of the Earth,
great.
and of course it completely leaks out the the shot. It's absolutely hilarious. And I can't believe that AP would even rebroadcast this. I mean, look at that. It clearly bounces, and then it comes back up and then rolls to the side after it hits that mock-up back there.
And that's something, that screen is way closer than I was thinking it was. I don't even, what's that, like 10 feet away? 6 feet?
Yeah.
Not 6, but it's
yeah,
really
if it's
close.
If it's underneath it, if it's a projection underneath a gigantic take at Star City, Russia, or wherever, you know it's not going to be 50 feet away. That would be insane. So I would think that the pool, I don't know how deep the pool is there. Maybe somebody can pull up some specs on it. But obviously they would have to have enough room to work above it and still have it down there.
It is really funny, though.
It's ridiculous.
Like, they just let this, and it's like, it's the news people have it like, oh, look at that. They dropped it. Up, it's floating away.
And Bob, you saw in my other video where the newscaster says, well, let's go live to the astronauts in space, and then it's to like somebody's garage with the dome.
I saw that.
Yep.
Too funny.
Pretty crazy. So I wanted to mention this stuff, a couple things real quick. One thing, if you've got my screen up, and Aaron Dover, who is a guy that's often in the chat, came up with a little app for the Android that's kind of cool. He calls it the Flat Earth Detector. And
yeah, the guy's been awesome. The guy's done a lot of good work. He was emailing me back, 3 weeks ago or even a month ago, and I kept telling him, put out some videos, and he started, and I think he's done an awesome job. So I just wanted to give him a plug there. Check out his videos, and he also made an app. So go ahead, Bob.
Yep, yeah, he made this app, and so I downloaded it, tried it out. It's fairly simple, and it uses the built-in sensors in the Android. The azimuth, the elevation that you're pointing, also the rotation factor. And so what you do is you take it and you turn it on and you point it at the horizon that you see. And when you've got it right on the horizon, it'll pop up with this little thing on the bottom that says, "Oh, flat Earth, flat Earth." So it's kind of cool. It's kind of a novelty, but at least it will give you some coordinates that your phone is picking up as far as your direction that you're facing and the phone's roll axis and tilt axis. So I thought I'd throw that in there just because I thought it was kind of cool. It's a free app on Google Play. You can go and get it, and it's just kind of fun to play with. And let's see. One of the other things that I wanted to kind of mention here also was Insanity is Sanity has got his The Flat World webpage up, which is, I guess, kind of would be the open version of what IFRS has. It has the forums that you can go into, and a little chat area, and it has tests and things that you can post. It's really pretty cool, and it's just getting going. And
I'd be careful, Jaron. I wouldn't visit there in case you get outed as a shill and blocked again from another forum.
What's funny is
I learned my lesson.
On his intro video, some guy from IFRS came on and said, "Well, why don't you just join the IFRS forum?" And I commented back, "It's probably because he doesn't want to get banned and called a shill." So I was just kind of giving a little fun on that, but it's nice to have another alternative that you don't have mods sitting around 24 hours a day banning you if you come up with an idea that may be a little bit off the wall. Because I mean, let's face it, it takes pushing the envelope a little bit to try and figure out some of these things that are going on. And with that, I will lead over to Mr. Thrive and Survive's work that he just released this, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before. And Jaron, you and I had talked about this. We've kind of bounced some theories back and forth about
Absolutely.
that maybe the sun isn't exactly what we think it is, and we're not seeing the actual sun. It could be a product of reflection or refraction, And so what Rich is doing, Mr. Thrive and Survive, as we all know, the equinox is coming up, what I believe, the 22nd, 21st, 22nd of this month. And at that point, timeanddate.com basically shows almost every point on Earth seeing the sunrise at 090 and setting at 270. And he identified, and you and I have also talked about this, that is a problem for the flat Earth model. It's also a huge problem for the globe Earth model, but there's many more problems with the globe Earth model. And so he basically went to work trying to figure out what could cause that. And so what he came up with is the idea of a lensing effect that the sun's light, the sun's rays are actually being diffracted, refracted, excuse me, not diffracted, but refracted out through the firmament. Now, I know one of the problems that you had, Jaron, was that that would put the sun behind the firmament. And so I actually started looking at some scripture. And it's interesting because when you look at scripture, the description of the firmament sounds very much like it's some sort of an area.
Like an enclosure almost, huh?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that crystalline firmament would not only be behind it, keeping the waters above out, so to speak, but it also would have that crystalline structure in front of it. And what he's positing here is that it is that crystalline that kind of has not necessarily just a prism effect, but it acts the same way in that it is refracting the sun to appear to be many places along many different latitudes at the same time. And of course, this is easily demonstratable. It's been shown over and over and over again to be a fact. I mean, crystals will definitely do that to light. And the other thing that I thought of was that, you remember a few weeks ago when we were looking at the sun, from those balloon experiments, and I was looking at it and I was saying, wow, if that thing's only 100,000 feet and that sun looks right there, I was wondering how in the world, the sun could appear to be so close and almost at the exact same, elevation, the same plane that you were looking out on. And again, this phenomenon right here would explain that, because even if the sun was higher, and here we are down here, we're looking at it and we're seeing it is barely higher at all because, again, of the refractive properties of this crystal, of the firmament, if you will. So to me, that is going to give us our worldwide appearance of the sun rising at 090 and setting at 270 by virtue of this very property that he's demonstrating right here. Now, another way that you could look at this would be to, and I think, and then Paul Chief actually comes up with this example, and I won't play it because I don't want to get any strikes for anything, but this is actually how a headlight works, okay? And what it does is it fires the beams of light out through the parabolic reflector, and also gives you a very similar effect. And that could be the backside here could be the curvature of the firmament as well, causing this effect. So there are two definite possibilities that could explain, I think, what we're all going to be seeing in about a week. You guys have any comments on that?
That picture there definitely makes a lot of sense to me, because as I've voiced often, is it appeared in some of the films that we've taken of the sun, and we took one, I believe it was Sunday night, maybe it was Saturday night, where the sun was absolutely a thick red because of the fires that have been happening in California this last month. And it appears sometimes when that sun falls behind the clouds that the light is actually not emanating from that particular disk. But if you looked at that picture you were just showing, it kind of showed almost that black kind of shooting the beams behind it, and then we would see how, if you look at that black circle and picture that that's the sun, to where the beams are actually coming out of not the center of it, but the edges. for lack of a better way to put it.
Mhm.
And then hitting off of this particular firmament and then reflecting back at the people on Earth. So this is all awesome work that I don't want to say I'm proud of, but I'm excited that people are doing this kind of thing, because this is really what my hope was 6 months ago when we started all this, is that people would start testing and looking at things from different angles, and these are the kind of things we're talking about. This is something that would not have been allowed to have been talked about a year ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And so it's great to see other people doing this, and we've got some very talented people out there who are definitely putting in some thought, some heavy thought on it, and also some of the prism effect that you see. When you said that you see it as an intensely red or orange color, could also be acting as somewhat of a prism, you know, causing a breakup of the light spectrum. So
Yeah, and then from that you see what is the most favorite symbol of the elite.
yes, the little sun with the beams being split right down, on top of the pyramid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they always are throwing this right in front of our face, constantly laughing because we don't get it, and and even with this much conclusive proof, I think that there is even more to this mystery, and of course, this is going to be something for another night of discussion. But I've been reading a document, and honestly, I don't even know where I got it from. But it was a document. Let's see, it's this PDF right here. Let's see. Somebody sent me, or I got it, but it says Yellow Rules for Texas Posting is Old Soul, 200-page thread entitled Divine Couple on Disclosed TV Forum. And I'll actually see if I can't put up a link to it. Well, the link is actually right here, but a link to the PDF. But this is fascinating. I don't know who this guy is that's posting his old soul, but basically he's positing that we are actually under the primary plane of the Earth. I guess what you would call the shoal or whatever, like on the flat Earth maps, and that basically everything has been reproduced down here. And he goes into some very, very interesting, ideas that seem very plausible. And we'll save this for another night, but I did want to bring it up, and I will post a link after the show, and maybe we can put this on a Dropbox or something, or people can download it. And I don't know where I got this from. All I know is I got it in Hawaii. I downloaded it to read at another time. It's like 350 pages, roughly 343. But I have found it to be absolutely fascinating, and I've just been riveted to it ever since I started reading it. So, yeah, there's just some really, really amazing ideas coming out, and we cannot be afraid to use our imagination and be creative with thought, because I don't think that the mystery is going to be quite so easy as just to be able to solve it via empirical evidence. It's going to require a preponderance of evidence, not only from information taken from the Bible, but information taken from ancient zetetic science experiments and modern day experiments. And it's going to take some hypothesizing and some theorizing to actually come up with a true answer. But one thing that we are absolutely certain of is that the Earth is not a ball, and we are not blasting through space at 600,000 miles an hour or anything like that. And I think to get to the truth, we have to kind of use our imagination a little bit, and not be afraid to throw things out there for others to critique, consider, add input on.
Bob, have you done any looking into the Mandela effect at all?
No, I haven't. In fact, don't believe I'm even familiar with it. What is it?
Well, I guess I can talk about it a little bit next week, because it's actually something that gets quite deep. But for instance, the children's classic Snow White, when the queen looks into the apparatus on the wall, right? What does she say?
I don't know. What does she say?
TJ, do you know that cartoon?
Mm-hmm. Is that the one where they do talk to the mirror?
Yeah. So what is it said? What is the saying?
I think it's the mirror, mirror on the
On
wall.
the wall.
Right.
Who's the fairest of them all, or something to
Right. Well,
that
that's actually changed now. It's actually magic mirror on the wall,
Oh.
not mirror on the wall. So there's
Okay.
actually quite a few examples of this. Do you remember the Tom Cruise movie, that's something with a vampire?
Never saw it, but I know which one you're talking about.
And do you remember the name of it?
Let's see. No, actually, I do not.
TJ, you? It's called
Sleeping
Interview.
with
No, I don't know.
Interview with the Vampire.
Right, and it's been changed. It is now Interview with the Vampire. So there's quite a few things like this. Have you ever heard of the Berenstain Bears?
Yes.
Yep.
The kids' book, right? So
Yes.
how do you think Berenstain is spelled?
Berenstain or Eien?
Right, it's one of those, right? But if you look at the books now, it's actually Berenstain, Stain. So, and I couldn't believe it. I ran downstairs because obviously we have a plethora of books, and pulled out a book, and it says Berenstain, Stain.
You know this.
And,
go ahead. I was
go
going to say this document that I'm reading, that I just was talking about, talks about how the elites are actually going through rewriting things, and republishing things and changing names, just like exactly what you're saying.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, that's what the
great
Mandela effect is.
about that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So if you look into it, I think it's something we could talk about, even possibly tomorrow, because there's quite a lot of these things. Do you remember the Sarah Jessica Parker show that was on HBO?
Sex in the City?
Right. What did you say it was?
Sex in the City.
Right.
No,
now,
I thought
now
Sex
it's
in the City.
right. Now it's Sex and the City.
Yeah, it used to be Sex in the City.
Correct. I mean, that's something that we would all admit. Well, I was watching a couple videos on it because it's something I've been interested in, and it's almost as if, remember the experiment to where they were looking at the slit experiment, the double slit experiment, right? Well, it's almost as if in some of these videos they're saying that it's possible that things are being changed for those of us who are aware. Like, for instance, didn't we all grow up believing that there was a North Pole where Santa lived?
Absolutely. They even showed the little barber pole, that was up there.
Right, which is gone now. There is no more North Pole. Go there on Google Earth and there's water.
Yeah.
That they have completely eliminated the North Pole.
They moved that to Colorado. They did, seriously. We have the North Pole here now.
Is Santa there?
Yeah, they have the Santa Claus and everything. It's crazy, but yeah, it's in Colorado now. So there you go. We found it.
So it's just an interesting thing to look into because it does talk about this particular effect where there's lots of these things that are being changed right in front of our face. And it's something that, like you said, we need to use our imagination for some of these things. I don't think, and I've kind of come to my own personal conclusion in the last week or two, that I don't think the sun is something that can be measured as far as a size or a distance. And I think that the reason for that is to prove that nobody can measure the size or the distance. And that's just something I've kind of come to that as to think that they can measure it and say it's 93 million miles away and it goes this fast and it spins like this and does all these things, I think is a load of shit. I don't think that they know it all. And as we're trying to get these distances down, and I'm starting to see kind of the thing that you said, that there's an issue with the sun on the flat Earth that doesn't work. Now, of course, the issue with the globe Earth is much larger. But if we're talking about reflection or refraction through some sort of crystalline structure that none of us can even fathom, then it's going to be something that cannot technically probably be measured. So it's almost as if I'm hoping people expand even beyond that. And like you said, all I know is that it's not a globe. That's all I can even say, is that I know it's not a globe. I know we're not whizzing through space. I know I'm not spinning. I know that sun that I can see myself every day, take photos of, and see videos of people sending balloons and people from planes, and I'm sure Bob has seen it from a plane. And these are things that can help you see the sun is not 93 million miles away. That is complete bullshit. And so from that, we should all be able to step away from the globe completely and not hang on to it anymore. And the unfortunate fact is 95% of the world is gripping that globe with everything that they can, because the idea of the fact that that has been lied to us about is a devastating blow. And I understand it. I mean, it's something that I had to reach the conclusion of 6 months ago. It's something that Bob came to the conclusion of 6 months ago, TJ about the same time, that we understand it's not easy. You know, we understand that it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever come to grips with. But I think people need to see on the other side is a freedom that I've never felt anything like before, which is the freedom of just knowing it's not true, it is bullshit, there's more to this than we think, we're not insignificant, we're not flying through outer space and there's all these wasted other super Earths. And I mean, what is a super Earth? You know, I think this Earth is super. You know, I don't need super Earths showing up every other day from NASA. It's all nonsense. And I just wish people would get to that place to where they realize the sun is not what they say. The Earth is not what they say. The curvature just isn't there. It can't be measured. I mean, if you just take a look at people who say they see the curvature, right? We've heard it a million times. People say, oh, from a plane, I've seen the curvature. And you're like, okay, so you've seen the curvature, then where does the curvature end? Imagine that you were to start looking in a 360-degree circle around you. And you're saying that you see a curvature, so you see a bow or a letter N, for lack of a better example, but you see this little shape. Now, if you look to your left and look to your right and went all the way around in 360 degrees, where does that stop curving?
Exactly. You know, Jaron, the thing with that is also is you have to look at this. Even if we were on a ball Earth, okay, you would never see a curvature, especially going left to right. And the reason for that is
unless you run a cylinder, right?
Well, I don't. What do you mean on a cylinder? Well, yeah. Okay, yes, I understand.
Right.
Yes. Okay, but
because the curve is going around you, and you're not
right. But my point is that if you are on a ball and you're on the top of the ball, you're never going to see at any direction Earth curving on a lateral plane.
Absolutely.
Because in all directions the Earth would be falling away from you. So you would never, ever, ever see a curve, even if the Earth was a ball. And just do a little thought experiment. You know, put yourself on top of a globe and just look around. And if you look at it, you're going to see that every direction it falls away from you. You are not going to see any curve whatsoever. You're just going to see something that's falling away from you. And of course, the horizon would never, ever, ever rise up to your eye level.
Exactly, and that's kind of my point is why do we have people out there arguing on behalf of the globe with evidence that's not even factual?
Well, some of them I've seen say that when the horizon falls, you would have to be up really high, and it would only be such a tiny fraction of a degree that you really wouldn't be able to notice it.
So then how do they explain what we see from the ISS footage?
Exactly.
Exactly. And yeah, Matrix Decode says that his horizon vid details this, and it does. And I saw that. That's a good video, Matrix, that you put out there. But it's true. You know, and then another person, Jazakonda, says the curve stops when it reaches the other end, making a ball. Of course, that's true. But the point here, Jazakonda, is that if you are looking out and you're looking at the Earth on a lateral plane, you are not going to see a curve from left to right or across that lateral plane. Everything is going to be falling away from you. And that's the whole thing of what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. So, yeah, you know, do some thought experiments. This is not that tough, and people coming up with silly arguments like that. Oh, well, I've seen, and whenever I hear that, they say, "Oh, I've seen the curve." It's like, really? And then I will show them a globe, and I will say, okay, you're standing in the globe. Tell me how you're seeing a curve on the horizon laterally from you. You're not going to. And they'll sit there and go, oh, yeah, you're right, because it's falling away at every point. And then, like I said, furthermore, the horizon would never rise to meet you at eye level either if you were standing on that ball.
No, and even the ISS video footage that we watch every Tuesday, and we'll talk about this tomorrow a little bit, and I think it will help people understand what we're saying, but it's as if that 2D plane is just simply being tilted back. It is not as if you're on a ball. If you're on a ball, then as that ship gets up above it, then you would see it falling off the edge, right? But we don't see that. We see it almost as if they tilted it up. And one good example of this that everyone should be able to see is I keep getting people who tell me, idiot, you can see it with a telescope, go outside and take a look. And I've actually seen it before. I've stood on my front lawn and watched the ISS appear from one horizon, go across the sky, and disappear at the other horizon. Now,
Me too.
Again, you've seen it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, again, it's lit, right? So how is it getting lit? They say it comes from the sun. And the sun, being on the other side of the Earth, could not light an object that is 150 miles from on top of the Earth. That's nothing. 150 miles lifted up on a globe. If you look at the sun and put the sun on the other side of the globe, how would it light the ISS?
All right, so let's answer that. If the ISS is shown as real live footage, when it goes dark, the ISS is not ever lit up. It's only gets lit up by some light on the ISS itself, but it's always dark. Never do we see the sun beaming
Good point.
on it.
Well,
Never.
we do see it for a little bit, right? It goes dark, and then sometimes there's a little time period where, but technically speaking, you can then go, if you're in that particular location on Earth, you can watch it in the sky, but it will be lit the entire time it crosses your horizon or your sky. So why is it not lit the entire time it's on the dark side? It should be getting hit by the sun.
Exactly.
But it doesn't. And these are the kind of things that I wish people would stop the battle, is because what I don't think people understand is this will forever be a fight if you're just going to grip the globe and say, I'm not letting go of this thing no matter what, because it's what was taught to us in school, and science says it's true, and it was in our science books, and it's in our geography books, that then you are just destined to forever believe the words of man. And really, that's where I go into the whole thing about it's nothing different than a religion. It is the exact same as people who will hold that Bible no matter what. And anything that changes in real life, they'll just change their view of the Bible or their interpretation of the Bible to match their reality. But the problem with it is people won't do that with the globe. They just grip it, they hold on to it, they make excuses for it. Every different thing you can imagine, oh, it's refraction, it's reflection, it's mirage, it's you name it, rather than just say to yourself, you know what, there's a possibility that this is not the truth. And that's where I went back to what I asked James, when there's nobody who can say that when they were told they were spinning said, oh yeah, that makes sense, we're spinning. It's just not what happened. Everybody thought to themselves, what? What do you mean we're spinning? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, there's so many times where I'm out taking pictures with Melissa and we're looking at the stars and we're looking at the sun and we're looking at the moon and we're taking photographs, and it hits me that people believe that what we see with the rising and setting sun and moon is because we ourselves are spinning around in a ball. It's preposterous. It really is upsetting that I wish there were more, and I call them human beings. I feel like a human being at this point can recognize truth from fiction when it comes to your real life everyday experiences. And what's an absolute brain killer and a downer is the fact that there's so many people who I don't even look at any longer as human beings, because you can't just look at what we're given and say to yourself, no, I still believe what science tells me is the truth, even though it makes zero sense with reality. And
Absolutely.
that's the hardest thing. It bugs me to no end, because I really think, like I said, let's say there's 5 billion, 7 billion, 10 billion. I don't care how many people are on the earth. But however many there are, We're all truth seekers. We all want to know the truth. And believe me, I understand that just saying, I follow science is really easy. And it's a really easy way to put yourself in the position of truth and feel like you're better than everybody. Because look at me, I believe in science, and science is the truth of everyday life. And if it's not the truth and we figure out some other thing, well, then we'll just simply switch and we still have the truth. So it's an easy way out. It's an absolute cop-out.
They're basically putting their ego, they're staking their ego on science, because they don't know any better, so it's a fair bet, and they are either unable or unwilling to open their mind, think for themselves. Like I said, I could be called gullible sometimes because I will consider almost anything. Because especially after researching conspiracies for nearly 2 decades now, I'm at the point where absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, surprises me. Sometimes I'm shocked, but nothing really surprises me. And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to set aside your rational mind and what you've been indoctrinated with, and consider other possibilities. One other thing I want to mention.
What's the hurt? It's like people are afraid of being called stupid. And believe me, I understand. 2 out of 10 emails I get is from someone saying, you're an absolute buffoon. And 5 out of 10 comments is somebody saying you're a fool. But those people can't come with any evidence other than that. That's all they have to bring to the table and it's like, now at this point, I can just laugh them off because it's, okay, so you're just saying you follow science, and even though everything I'm saying makes perfect sense to your everyday life, you are choosing to call me an idiot because that's what your religion taught you. Your religion taught you if somebody comes speaking of anything other than a ball Earth flying through space, that they're an idiot. And to me, it's upsetting. It just simply is a matter of, are you able to look at the world, and like Bob said, I'm the same way. I'll listen to what anybody has to say, because what can it hurt besides being able to process it, work it out in your brain as far as, does this fit my actual reality? Does this fit what I see every day? And then either shoving it out into the false column or moving it into the perhaps it's true column. And I feel like people who are into science or want to be backers of science have lost that ability. Now they just say, I'm not smart enough to know based on things that you give me. It doesn't matter what I say to somebody like Red's rhetoric. Doesn't matter in the world, because he's already come to the conclusion that science, which is the collection of ideas of these varied scientists and mathematical proofs, are way smarter than any human could ever be. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think that that's an absolute mistake, and all you need to do is just look at the past and look at what we've been told versus what's ended up being true. And I take dating as a huge example, not dating girls. I'm talking about radiocarbon dating, and the fact that we all know we can't date rocks, yet they'll take an area sample from around these rocks, like Stonehenge, and they look for things that have organic material, like ashes, and then they'll take these ashes and date the ashes, and then come back and tell us Stonehenge has been there 5,000 years. And it's like, do people even think that how could ashes in the ground have anything to do with those stones? They don't mean anything. The stones could have been put there last Wednesday. It doesn't mean that the ashes in the ground would have ever changed. And so if they can take those ashes and date them and say these ashes are 5,000 years old, great, the ashes are 5,000 years old. But what are you saying about the rocks? That the rocks had to be put there at the same exact time that the ashes were? It's the whole thing is complete nonsense. And I mean, just because you found ashes in my backyard, if you dug them up and dated them and they said they were dated 2,000 years ago, does that mean my house was put up 2,000 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. You can't date rocks. I mean, I've dated some women that are dumb as rocks, but you can't date rocks.
But they're fun.
They're definitely fun. Usually, yeah.
They get you into trouble, but they're pretty fun.
Yep. And those are the times you're really thanking God that they are dumb as rocks. But anyway, sorry, ladies out there. I'm being a male chauvinist pig, and I apologize.
Well, and like if women don't know that we don't love them, I don't know what to say. I love every bit of you. Yes. But No, and I just think that it's become a frustration of mine, and I'm trying to look for ways to open that up. And a lot of people email me saying, "How do you explain this to your family? How do you explain this to your friends?" And the first thing that I always respond with is, well, are they ready for this information? Because, for instance, anybody who believes that we went to the moon simply accepts science interpretation of life, and they don't look at things themselves. And I understand the reason. Believe me, I mean, if you were to poll the United States, I wouldn't even know what the percentage would be. What do you think, 80-20?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, I mean, you're
Maybe.
talking only 20% of people even are willing to have looked at the data and said, we didn't go to the moon. And so of those 20%, those are probably the only people that will even be able to grasp this concept. And my hope is if we got that 20% to ever understand we're not on a ball, then from there I think that it would have to be a case, and what I'm trying is I just laugh at people at this point. I just laugh because I really do think it's funny that people think that we live on a spinning ball. And I think that's the only way we'll ever get people to wake up is if 20% of people are laughing at you. Hopefully those people start to think, maybe I do need to look into the other side. And we've already looked into the other side, and that's what I think people don't understand. A lot of people email me and say, hey, I got kicked out of your chat on your site. And I say, well, what were you doing? Were you trying to force the globe down people's throats? Because my chat is not a place for that. That was never the intent. The intent was somewhere for people who believe in the flat earth to get together and enjoy a conversation between each other where we could compare evidence, look at videos, look at pictures, and try to come up with a better model to help us change the world in that direction. It's certainly not for people to come in and say, well, what about the Coriolis effect? Well, what about this? What about the curvature seen from an airplane? That will get you kicked out because we've already learned that. We went through
And there's a million
schooling.
videos on it. And there's a million videos on it. Everybody's talked about it. And that's one of the things that I've had a problem with. You know, people, they want a personal tutor. Either that or they're just looking for an argument. I'm not sure. But even if they're legitimately looking, they don't want to go and do the research themselves, even when it's as easy as just simply watching videos. Because there are some outstanding material out there, you know, on the technical details of the flat Earth, and there's a lot of people talking about it. And then if they come and they start entering in a discussion, for example, I mean, I noticed Incheese is in the audience, and you know, we are able to engage in intelligent conversation on some of those points. And I know that he is also asking Rich about some things, and he has asked me about some things. And you know, I obviously this is a person that is a ball earther, and that's great. But unless you're actually out there doing the research, then you really don't have a lot of grounds to come in demanding answers from anybody. And you know, like I said, you know, a while back, Incheese, you know, posited a problem to me that. I think I answered to, you know, to somewhat degree of satisfaction, but I think it's being answered even further now with, you know, Rich's work in how we're going to be able to see the sun rise and sunset at 090 and 270. Those are the kind of people that I think are actually looking and trying to understand things. And again, you have to go out and have to do the work, watch the videos, read some books, whatever. But there's so many other things that play into this that you've kind of got to, you know, do some research and learn a little bit broader field of knowledge than just have somebody, you know, preach to you that the world is flat, because there is science behind it. There's empirical science. There's calculated science. You know, we've tried to do a little bit of both. There's books that have been written for hundreds of years. I mean, let's face it, the flat Earth debate has been raging for a long, long time, and there's some outstanding material out there. All you have to do is go find it and look at it, instead of going and demanding answers and saying, well, if you don't show me this, then you've shown nothing, and of course that makes your model wrong, and you're full of crap, and ha ha ha, my ego's great, and I've won the argument. That just doesn't fly with me at all, and frankly, it just pisses me off, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and me as well. And I don't think they understand exactly what science is, because science should be the retesting and the evaluating and the more experiments and debunking. And these are things that are allowed in different areas of science, but not when it comes to the globe. Don't you dare try and disprove the globe. Don't you try and say that the sun isn't 93 million miles away, because we've already discovered those things are true. And that's simply not the case. The fact is, if the sun isn't 93 million miles away, then there's no way we're going around it. And if there's no way we're going around it, then there's no way we're spinning. And if there's no way we're spinning, then there's not such thing as gravity. And if there's no such thing as gravity, then the moon is up there for another reason. And this is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of the fact that once you debunk one of those little facts, the whole thing crumbles. And I hate to tell you guys, the whole thing should crumble. The whole thing is garbage. And these are the things that I understand. I wish I knew all the truths, and I don't. But I know what isn't true, and these mathematical formulas that are all based on constants and are based on numbers that they've already decided are true. Once you start asking them, well, how did you come up with this? And John LeBon knows all about it with his video that he did with the two guys that were claiming the round Earth, is that when he tried to challenge their numbers of where did they come from, how did they get these, they go back to saying, well, we learned them via GPS. GPS told us where we were, et cetera, and they don't understand that GPS is all based off of this lie. That of course GPS is going to give you numbers that correspond to where you're at on a globe, because it's the global positioning system. Doesn't mean that you live on a globe. It means if you lived on a globe, then this is where you would be at this particular time, and this would be the curvature of the Earth. So their math may work out, but it doesn't mean that it's true.
Exactly.
And I've had so many people email me and tell me, you flippin' tard, math is reality. And they couldn't be more wrong.
No, math is not reality. Math only supplements what observed data can show. And in this case, math does not seem to be supplementing why, in the curve, in the round Earth model, math doesn't seem to be supplementing why we are unable to see curvature to the Earth, or why we're unable to measure it. Granted, we're doing the equations, math is telling us what it should be, but our empirical evidence and our measured evidence even is not matching what the math prediction is. Does that mean that the math is wrong in that instance? No, it's just wrong as applied to this model, and that's what the difference is. So
absolutely.
And nobody's saying that math is something that's useless. I mean, obviously, math it's huge. I mean, in engineering and in computers, my particular areas of work, and my son is learning this as well. I've been trying to tell him for so long, math is so incredibly important to what you're trying to do, and you really need to get more involved with your math class. And so now he understands it. Now that he's coding in C++, now that he's doing all this writing, and he's coming up with formulas and performing Boolean algebra for logical operators, he now understands the importance of math, and it definitely has its place. But when you use math, especially when you get into calculus and you get into this higher theoretical math, to prove things that are unobservable, are simply not demonstrable in any way, shape, or form, then the math is analogous to pissing in the wind. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because you have no real model to apply it to. So that's the things that we need to take into consideration, because one of the arguments that I hate hearing is that, oh yeah, these guys sit there and they denounce math, and as they're typing away on their computers, which if it wasn't for math and science and engineering, you wouldn't even have. It's like, nobody is saying that science is wrong in those areas. However, it is being distorted and contorted and used falsely to tell us things about our world that are simply not verifiable and are not observable. So,
Yeah, and nobody's saying that math is, at least I'm not, and I know you're not, because I think math is great. Like you said, its uses are unending. But if you take certain figures, like the fact that the sun is 92 million miles away, and we go in a 584 million mile orbit, and the sun is 864 million miles in diameter. If you take all those numbers, then yes, you can create a mathematical system that says that we are on a spinning ball, and those things are great, but you can't individually verify. How are you going to verify for me that the sun is 92 million miles away? How are you going to verify that? If you think NASA has, you are so lost and confused, I don't know where to start. If you think that you can figure out that the sun has an 864 million mile diameter, then you're out in la la land. It just, those things do not even make sense at all. The fact that they say that the sun is also orbiting the Milky Way, and we go in this 584 million mile orbit, and at the end of the year, the stars above our head all reset. They reset and start over. You're back to where you were January 1st last year with Polaris straight ahead of the North Pole, and the seasonal constellations are back where they started. How could that possibly happen after you've traveled in a 584 million mile orbit in which the sun itself is also traveling at astronomical speeds? I think it's a total of 11 billion miles that we travel in a year. Yet at the end of that 11 billion miles, we reset and start over.
Right,
How
and
is that?
everything looks just the same. And also, one other thing that you need to take into consideration, like Red's rhetoric, demonstrated about when he was making fun of you for claiming the sun and the moon were basically 3,000 miles up. TJ on his channel had went through. I think the video is called "Is Jeranism Wrong?" or whatever, and he shows that he does the geometry exactly like Red's rhetoric did. And it shows, well, sure enough, 234,000 miles or whatever, the moon is away by observed data. And then he says, okay, so let's now take the curvature of the Earth out, and lo and behold, look at how this happens. So TJ, I have a question for you. With that formula that you used, I mean, given the fact that Red's rhetoric used observed angles from somebody in Florida and I think him in California, what would happen if they did the very same thing with the sun? Would it also, because they appear to be the same size to us, the sun and the moon. So if we're making an observance from Florida at the angle that the sun appears to be, and we do the same in California, and if we calculate the curvature Earth in, will it not come up and show the sun at 234,000 miles also? And then if we flatten it out, would it not also show the sun at a distance of, between 3,000 and 4,000 miles? Am I wrong in assuming that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you bring up a point of, I wonder if they've ever done that same experiment and come up with 93 million miles away. Because I know they usually do some kind of like, well, I took the shadow that was on a planet that was passing between the sun and the Earth, and why don't you just do the same exact experiment you did with the moon and see what you come up with? But yeah, we need a way to measure the sun, and like I mentioned this before, and us three do experiments on the moon and the sun and see what we come up with.
Well, it's like Bob said, though, if both things are observed to be the same size, how could they come out with any difference if they used the same data that they used for the moon?
They would come out, the sun, it seems to me, it would come out at 234,000 miles also.
Which they know can't be right, so immediately they're going to throw in something else or say that they used another method.
Yep.
Because one thing would break down the whole belief. If they looked up and said, no, the sun appears to be only 238,000 miles, well, they know that based on the size of the Earth, there's no way we can go in an orbit around something that small. So then they would know that there's no way that we spin. It's the same thing. It all breaks down to the point where everything we've been told is a lie. So the only kind of mathematical proofs that Red's rhetoric will show us is the kind of proofs that verify what he believes.
Sure.
And that's what's different about what we're willing to do, is we're willing to even say things that disprove our theory, because all they do is make us want to go out and research more.
Exactly.
And that's what my hope is that let's keep doing science. Keep trying different methods, trying different ways, and that's why I hope that if, let's say in a perfect world, in a month from now, 50% of people had come to the conclusion that the ball is not real. Again, I don't believe that could happen, but I'm going to pretend it's a perfect world where 50% of human beings woke up and realized it's impossible to be on a spinning ball. Well, that 3.5 billion people, or take it down to 1.5 billion people, however many people that would be, the absolute desire for truth would send all those people out doing experiments, researching, studying, and we would have our answers. The problem is that there's only a few of us that are actually trying. And I don't mean a few as in 10 or 20. I mean there's only a couple hundred. And that's not enough for us to uncover everything that we need to. It may be in due time, but...
You know what, Darren? I think, here's what I believe. I think that, yes, there are a few of us that are willing to stick our necks out, be willing to be ridiculed and called fools. But again, as more and more people are coming on board and we start building a larger and larger preponderance of evidence, eventually there's going to be a breaking point. And when that happens, then all the scientists, the physicists, the high-level people are then going to come out and say, yeah, they're right. And I think that at that point, as soon as, that point, whatever that threshold is, I think when that happens, and I also believe that's not too far away, when that happens, it's over,
Did you see the quote from a tweet of Neil deGrasse Tyson's?
Well, which quote?
Oh, you would know it. One second, I want to get it exactly right, so I'm going to look it up real quick.
Okay. Is
It's
this one you
great
talked
because it's
about a while back, or is it recent?
No, it's just recently, this last week.
I haven't seen it then.
He says the kind of thing where you're like, why in the world would he say that?
I saw someone, they called him nailing the ass. I was like...
Yeah, that guy, he's he comes. The reason they picked him is because he comes across so smooth and soft-spoken, just like Crying Box. I mean, they're not stupid. The people that are promoting this, they come up with people that are very likable, and he is. He's very likable, even though he's egotistical as hell. Crying Box. I mean, Cammie, my wife, absolutely fell in love with him. Thought he was just, awesome, and it's like then she saw him for the liar that he is, and now she can't even stand him. But this is the type of universal appeal that they go for, and it's
okay. So here it is, and you tell me if there's any reason why he would say this. This was on September 7th, so a week ago today. He said, "There's no greater incentive to lie than the threat of punishment for telling the truth." End tweet.
Amen, Neil. Holy cow.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, jeez.
I'll repeat it again, and there's nothing else to it, and thank you, Brap, for emailing me that. There's no greater incentive to lie than the threat of punishment for telling the truth.
Wow.
So it makes me think, like, these are the kind of things that these guys are trying to get the truth out, but they can't. They cannot be responsible for saying something that everyone looks at and says, that's the reason why now nobody believes NASA's story. So it's got to be a bunch of little things. I think Buzz Aldrin's trying to get things out. Even Neil saying that.
Yeah, and Neil Armstrong saying that we just need to peel away truth's protective layers. That he's trying to tell people. Yeah, I mean unfortunately what he's saying, and I think he knows that he is one of those protective layers. Or he was acting as that, and you could tell by the sincerity and the look in his eye that he knew.
He was even crying at that point.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that there's a side of them that wants to tell the truth, but, again, the incentive of extreme punishment or death is, I mean, look at Joe Rogan. I mean, my God, you have to wonder, did they threaten him, or was it just because of the fact that he got his new TV show, that the reason that all of a sudden he went from being the world's biggest opponent of the moon landings to now the world's biggest proponent, saying that we win.
Yeah, there's just too much evidence now. There's too many things that they would have had to fake, and that's all things that are said in every forum across the internet from people who believe in the moon landings.
Yeah.
You know, that's all they all say is that there's, oh, what are you saying? They were able to convince 400,000 people to lie? And it's like, anybody who's ever done research into the actual hoax itself knows that that's not at all the case. But that's the go-to explanation for people who believe in it. And if you believe in something because of the slim chances of the hoax, I hate to tell you that that's not really the way you should be looking at things.
Yeah. Oh, here's something that's interesting. I'm looking at the chat. Island Online News says, I'm a Christian. I will defend God's ball. Well, first of all, Island Online News, it's God's circle.
Yeah, show me the word
circle,
show me the
not
word
ball
or sphere or globe in the Bible.
Well,
Yeah.
that guy or whoever, in that case,
It does
posted
not.
in there, God showed me the ball. It's a sphere. God showed it to me, and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Just
Bible
like
says sphere.
Stephen Christ, God took him up in a vision, and he was on a boat in the waters in the heaven, and he saw the back of the sun.
And this is exactly my point, is that why would we believe anything that anyone says in that manner anyway? Is humans are fallible, and if we don't know that, then we seriously know nothing at all. But no matter what you think God showed you, or no matter what, that's between you and God. That's between you two. It should not be put into a book. It should not be told to everyone by saying, you must believe this because God showed it to me. If it was important for God to show, he would show everyone, in my opinion.
Yep. Agreed. M. Malone says a circle is no more a ball than a square is a box. That
Exactly.
is absolutely true. And not only that, you know, again, these people that claim to be Christians, it's like, have you read the Bible? It's like, get real. You know, it clearly states that the earth is established and shall not be moved. It talks about, you know, God rules with the circle, with the earth as his footstool. He rules from above the circle of the earth. I mean, there are so many things that indicate that it's a circle, as well as outright saying it, but there is not one place, I defy you to find one place in the Bible that it talks about a sphere. You're not going to find it, not in any translation. Or ball, not there. And if you say so, then you're lying. You're just lying, because I defy you to show me the verse in Scripture where it says that. It's not there.
Now, Bob, one of the interesting things that you brought up last week that, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, I'm just going to tell you what my studies have shown me. When the Gospel of Thomas was brought up, because I looked into the Gospel of Thomas a year ago, and it was found in the Nag Hammadi Library, right, which was the collection of books found in the 50s, it might have been 40s. But what the Gospel of Thomas is 100 and, I want to say 108, could have been 120, I don't know, 100 and something sayings of Jesus. And they're laid out simply numbered. Number 1, blankety blank, 2, blankety blank. They're laid out. Now, when I did research on that, all 115 sayings of Jesus that are said in the Gospel of Thomas are also found in the 4 canonical Gospels. Now, that being said, there is an additional 100 and something sayings of Jesus that are found in the canonical Gospels that aren't found in the Gospel of Thomas. But the thing is every one of those can be attributed to earlier authors in the Gnostic traditions. So it's almost as if the Bible, as I've often said, is a rewriting or a collection of many people's beliefs. And so they took the words of this Gospel of Thomas and wrote them into Jesus, but they also took other Gnostic things like, the whole great commandment of love others as you love yourself is actually said in earlier times before Jesus. And that's one of the things that was put into the canonical Gospels that may not necessarily be Jesus' exact words. And in those studies that I did a year or two ago, that's when I kind of came to my own personal conclusion that I don't think the Bible is word for word God's word. And that's simply because there's evidence that it's been adjusted, changed, added to, subtracted from. Now, again, they wouldn't have been able to so much change the Old Testament as they were so easily able to change the New Testament. So I just remember you last week kind of passing off the Gospel of Thomas, and to me, that was part of the importance in my research last year. Actually, it's probably been 2 years ago now. That kind of helped me see that some of the things in the canonical Gospels, and I'm sure you've heard of the Q Gospel, right?
Yes.
Right. And so what that is basically there's one gospel that they figure all of the other gospels were written based upon. And you can do that in literary studies. You can look at one document and say each of these 4 canonical gospels was written with this as their basis, because what's in the Q gospel can be found in the other gospels. But if you tried to switch them around, say put Matthew and say, now does everything that are in these 4 other gospels coincide with Matthew? No, it's not true. That they can't, that there's things that were said that weren't part of this original. So it's just, for me, it was clues that led me to believe that what we have in those 4 documents, and I've said it before, the fact that that Mark was written first, and then they moved it second, and even added to the ending, those are all clues that, and I'm one to say that there's definite truth in there. I've said it a million times, and I will never change my opinion of that I think there's absolute legitimate points and proofs and great works of literature in the Bible. I just tend to not say it's the end all be all.
It's the interpretation that I have the problem with. The
Absolutely. And the fact, right, the languages that it was written in are not at all the language that we speak. And so maybe my job is to go learn Hebrew, but I would only do that if somebody told me, here's the original Bible, and it's in everything about it is original. So here you go, Jaron. All you need to do is go learn Hebrew, and you'll be able to read the Bible as it was given to us, which isn't even true. It's already been
Hebrew or Greek? Was it written
Greek? Really?
Yeah, right. That's what I thought. I thought it was written originally in Greek.
Right.
Well, it depends on, you're talking about the...
There's different books, too.
The
Torah.
Lack for a better word, the Old Testament and the New Testament. But even the Hebrew today is not the same Hebrew that it was written in. So the Hebrew has changed.
Yeah, and then you just look at the traditions that came along because of the translations, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the translation of the word that ended up being translated as virgin should have actually been translated as maiden. And so because of the English translation, when they translated and said virgin, now became this whole story of Jesus coming from a virgin, which then you look at and you'll even see Catholics to this day deny that Jesus had brothers or sisters.
Yeah, great, because Mary always stayed a virgin.
Right, and that's all based on the English. Right, that's all based on the English translation. It's not at all a belief of the Greeks or the people who wrote the Bible. They didn't believe that at all, but it was a mistranslation. They translated it as virgin when it should have been maiden, so it was just saying that Jesus was born to an unwed mother.
Yeah, and I think what I was saying, Jaron, when we were talking about Thomas and Jesus, is that I had read, gosh, I honestly can't remember, but I brought up the idea that I had read somewhere that Thomas was Jesus's twin brother.
Okay, maybe that's what you said.
That's kind of what I was talking about, and I don't know. I'm not a Bible scholar. I have studied it. I do know a fair amount about it, but somebody threw that forward, and they actually, at the time that I read it, had a fairly decent a case to support it, and I just thought, interesting, and I just kind of filed it away. And
there's some crazy stories in it. I mean, there's stories of Jesus being a child and killing people. That's in the Gospel of Thomas. Now, again, I'm not saying that the Gospel of Thomas is true. All I'm saying is that I believe that certain parts of all those old books should be looked at and taken for what they are.
Well,
and that's what I do,
And plus, there are many other Gospels that were not included in the Bible, and that, of course, was decided, by somebody, probably around the time of the Council of Nicaea.
Right, would have been about 300 when
Yeah, about
Constantinople.
325 AD, something like that. But
Right.
so again, books Enoch, Book of Enoch. There's so many books that were not included, and then of course then we have the Nag Hammadi texts like you talk about, and Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's so many other things that could be included that have been found to be very valid and legitimate, and it seemed to come from the same period. So
Right. And what happened
who
is
decides?
a group of men got together and said, this is what we will call the canon. This is the only thing that you're allowed to believe.
Yeah.
And that's what started me on my whole search was I'm not willing to just accept other men's interpretation of what I am supposed to do. This is what you are supposed to believe, Jaron. This is what is true scripture. But like you said, the book of Enoch has a ton of great things in it.
Mhm.
And who decided? Did God come and decide? No. There was the Pope who says he acts on behalf of God.
Yes, the Vicar of Christ.
Right. And
Whatever.
so if you want to believe in that and you want to believe in those things that Catholics believe, that's up to you. I tend to think that it's very easy for corruption to enter the Catholic Church, and if you study and the craziest thing to me, and maybe TJ, you'll have to answer me this. So TJ, you came from a Bible believing background, a literalist background?
Yep.
Okay, so what is the opinion of those kind of people of Catholics?
Well, the Catholics are basically all unsaved. They're not born again. They need to be born again. They're going to hell.
Right, and then they also, do they understand who made the decisions of what books would be considered part of the Bible that they now believe literally? See, that's the crazy thing.
I don't think so.
That's the Catholics. And that's what, I understand that there's many different Christian denominations nowadays, but they all trust in the writings of the Bible, and the books that were decided to go in or be left out or changed or added or moved was the Catholic popes in the 200, 300, 400s. So to me, I just never understood how, and my wife's family is very much Bible believing, and I've never understood why when I went and visited them, they had a lot of things to say about Catholics. And it was like, okay, I understand your problem with Catholics. I have the same problems. But do you not understand who gave you that book? Who wrote that book? Or not so much wrote it, but who decided the books that would be allowed in it? And these are the kind of disconnects I see throughout the world, is that nobody really looks at it. And I understand the Christians who want to believe in the Bible. Believe me, I understand, because I myself try to model my life after Jesus. That being said, I'm not saying I try and model it after the Jesus that was written in the book, and I believe that he is a real man who really rose from the dead. I don't think that's necessarily the fact. I think the idea of Jesus is very much an idea that should be spread around the world, which is love your neighbor as yourself, and that there is more to this life, and that the kingdom of God is at hand. Those things I believe in. So my only problem is the literalists who will bring that back and say, well, then why don't you call Jesus your Savior? Why don't you worship him as God?
Yeah, because if you don't, you got them clickety-clack shoes on. And
I had to listen to that again yesterday just because I think it's fun.
God, I know. It's so damn funny.
Clickety-clack. What did he do? Scalp out the brains? Oh, it is good stuff. All right, well, it's already 9 o'clock, so that's
3 hours.
Today.
Yep.
We will be back tomorrow at 6. We will watch the ISS and make more comments on it. And so bring your questions. I know we didn't answer very many questions today, so bring your questions tomorrow, and we will discuss those. Bob, anything final before we sign off?
Nope. Other than, I might let everybody know that Rory Cooper, My Perspective, has a new video out, Flat Earth Universe Part 2, in which he makes some really great points about angular rotation. I think you'll find it rather eye-opening, so I would recommend that. Matrix Decode has a video out that is his version of the Bedford Levels experiment, I believe he calls it. And so that's another good one to check out. But yeah, good stuff out there. Everybody take a look. Support the other flat earthers. We need to stick together as a community. And I think that we are well on our way to shutting down this line. And that's all I got from here in Denver.
Beautiful. Thanks, Bob. TJ, any final words?
Nope, just thanks for everyone being here, and have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, appreciate that. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us with episode number 8. Remind you guys to take care of each other, don't lie to each other, and to open your mind, because believe it or not, there's truth inside. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, this is Jeranism. Peace.
Peace.